Proxima Centauri is the closest star to our Sun, and it's only 4 light years away. That sounds close, right? Well, when scientists did the math, they discovered something that changed everything. With the fastest spacecraft we've ever built, it would take us more than 70,000 years to get there. That's right, 70,000 years. Generation after generation would be born and die inside the ship before anyone could see that star up close. This discovery made scientists ask something sad and fascinating at the same time. Are humans trapped forever in this little corner of the universe? Get ready to fall asleep while listening to this video, and let this question travel with you through your dreams. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where in the world you're watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Think about the phrase only 4 light years away. It sounds almost neighbourly, like something we could pop over and visit if we just built a slightly faster car. That feeling, that dangerous illusion of proximity, is the very first and perhaps most fundamental reason we will never reach Proxima Centauri. Our brains are not built to comprehend the true scale of the universe, and we consistently underestimate the sheer, empty vastness that separates stars. We hear 4 light years, and we process it as a distance, which it is, but we fail to internalise what that distance actually means in human terms. A light year is not a measure of time, it is a measure of immense space. It is the distance that a beam of light travelling at a speed that could circle the Earth 7.5 times in a single second covers over the course of an entire year. To put a number on it, 1 light year is roughly 9.5 trillion kilometres. So when we say Proxima Centauri is 4.2 light years away, we are talking about a journey of approximately 40 trillion kilometres. That is a 4 followed by 13 zeros. It is a number so large it becomes meaningless. A piece of abstract data that our minds simply cannot grasp. We understand distances like the span of a city, or the flight from New York to London, or even the 250,000-mile trip to the moon. Those are scales our species has experienced directly, but interstellar space operates on a different plane of existence entirely. A helpful analogy is to shrink our solar system down to a more familiar size. Imagine if the entire Sun, with all its planets out to Neptune, was condensed to fit inside a standard soccer field. On this scale, the Sun would be a grapefruit placed at the centre spot, Earth would be a tiny grain of sand about 23 metres away, and Neptune, the outermost planet, would be another grain of sand hovering near the opposite goal line. That is our entire known cosmic neighbourhood, our home system, fitting neatly within the bounds of a sports pitch. Now, where would the next grapefruit, the next star, be in this model? Using the same scale, Proxima Centauri would not be on the next field over. It would not even be in the same city. To find it, you would have to travel over 7,000 kilometres away. You would need to place our solar system soccer field in, say, Paris, and then travel all the way to Tehran to drop the next star. That is the true gap. That is the emptiness. Our most powerful rockets, the pinnacle of our chemical propulsion technology, are like trying to cross an ocean in a rowboat. We have become so accustomed to the incredible achievements of spaceflight within our solar system that we have developed a false sense of capability. We see the Voyager probes now in interstellar space and think we are on the cusp of the stars, but this is the critical misunderstanding. The Voyager probes, launched in the 1970s, are among the fastest objects ever to leave Earth. They are speeding away at about 17 kilometers per second. That is blisteringly fast by terrestrial standards. Yet, even at that incredible velocity, it took them over 40 years just to leave the gravitational influence of our Sun and enter the true void between stars. And at that speed, how long would it take to cover those 40 trillion kilometers to Proxima Centauri? The math is sobering. Travelling at 17 kilometers per second, a Voyager-like probe would need roughly 75,000 years to make the one-way trip. That is not a mission. That is a geological epoch. That is longer than all of recorded human history, stretching back to when the first humans were painting on cave walls. We are talking about a timescale where continents shift, ice ages come and go, and entire species evolve and go extinct. This is the reality that the phrase 4 light years hides. We are not just far from Proxima Centauri, we are separated by a gulf of time as much as space. Our entire framework for exploration and travel is built around human lifespans and historical timelines. We plan missions that last years, perhaps a decade or two. The idea of a project whose completion date is 75 millennia in the future is not just impractical, it is existentially absurd. It has no connection to our civilization, our goals, or our understanding of purpose. This scale problem infects every single aspect of a potential interstellar journey. It means that any spacecraft we send must be not just durable, but effectively immortal, surviving the relentless wear and tear of space for time periods that dwarf the pyramids. It means that any hope for a human crew involves confronting the concept of generational ships, idea we will explore more later, but which is born directly from this brutal timescale. Even if we could magically triple or quadruple the speed of our fastest probes, we're still talking about journeys lasting tens of thousands of years. The problem is that our intuition about speed is also broken by these distances. We hear about theoretical concepts like 10% the speed of light, and think that sounds slow, a mere fraction. But 10% of light speed is 30,000 kilometers per second. It is almost 2,000 times faster than Voyager is travelling. If we could achieve that, the trip to Proxima Centauri would drop from 75,000 years to about 42 years. That feels almost manageable, like something within the span of a single career. So the problem seems solved, right? Just go faster. But here is where the scale of energy required rears its head. Accelerating even a modestly sized spacecraft, say something the mass of the International Space Station, to 10% of light speed requires an amount of energy that is almost beyond description. It is equivalent to the total energy consumption of the entire human race for many decades. And that is just for the acceleration phase. You would then need to carry the fuel and systems to slow down at the destination, or you would scream past the star system in a matter of hours. The sheer mass of the fuel needed for such a journey under any known propulsion system becomes the primary obstacle. The rocket equation, a cruel and unforgiving law of physics, dictates that to go faster you need more fuel. But that fuel itself has mass, so you need even more fuel to push that fuel, and so on in a vicious cycle that exponentially increases the required starting mass. To get a spacecraft to a meaningful fraction of light speed, you would essentially need to build a fuel tank the size of a mountain for a payload the size of a car, and you would have to launch this entire mountain into space first. This is not an engineering challenge, it is a fundamental barrier imposed by physics and the scale of the energy reserves of our planet. So, when we casually talk about the closest star, we're engaging in a profound act of self-deception. We're taking a distance that is, in any practical human or even biological sense, infinite, and we are using language to tame it, to bring it into the realm of the conceivable. This illusion is the bedrock upon which all science fiction dreams of interstellar travel are built. It is the first filter that any realistic proposal must pass through, and most shatter against it immediately. The distance to Proxima Centauri is not a hurdle to be overcome with better funding or more willpower. It is a definitive statement about our place in the cosmos. We are creatures of a solar system, of a single star. Our achievements, as magnificent as they are in landing on the moon and sending robots to Mars, are local activities. They are the equivalent of learning to swim in the shallow end of a pool, while the interstellar ocean stretches out with depths and currents we cannot even measure. This is not a reason for despair, but rather for a clearer, more honest perspective. The dream of reaching another star with a vessel from Earth, especially one carrying fragile human beings, confuses a scientific ambition with a mythological one. It is akin to ancient sailors dreaming of the new world before they had even invented the compass or a seaworthy hull. We are in that early, primitive stage of cosmic understanding. Our telescopes and robotic probes are our compasses and maps. They tell us what is out there, but the journey itself, for us, for this flesh and blood version of humanity, is almost certainly a bridge too far. The distance is not just large, it is for all intents and purposes permanent. It is a quarantine imposed by space and time. Every other challenge that follows, from propulsion to radiation to human psychology, stems from this initial, insurmountable fact of scale. We look up at that point of light, Proxima Centauri, and we imagine it as a destination. But in truth, it is a lighthouse on a shore so distant that its light takes over 4 years to reach us. We are not seeing the star as it is now, but as it was when that light began its journey. We are forever looking into the past, separated from any present reality, there by an unbridgeable gulf. The very act of seeing it underscores our isolation. So, the next time you hear someone say it is only 4 light years away, remember the soccer field and the 7,000 kilometre gap. Remember Voyager, travelling for millennia. Remember the mountain of fuel needed for a fleeting glimpse of speed. The universe is not designed for quick visits. Its geography ensures that islands of life and matter remain isolated, perhaps forever. That is the first and most important lesson of interstellar space. Its scale is its primary defence, and it is a defence we are not equipped to breach. So we have established that the distance is an almost philosophical barrier, a sheer cliff face of empty space that our minds can't properly scale. But let's say we decide to try anyway. Let's assume we have the collective will to launch a mission that will take tens of thousands of years. The next question is, what do we ride in? What engine gets us there? And this is where we run headfirst into the second monumental wall, the one built not just by distance, but by the very technology that got us off our planet in the first place. We are prisoners of the chemical rocket. It is the only method we have ever used to achieve orbit and beyond, and it is spectacularly, utterly useless for going to another star. To understand why, you need to grasp a simple but brutal concept called specific impulse. Think of it as the miles per gallon for a rocket engine, a measure of how efficiently it uses its fuel to produce thrust. Chemical rockets, whether they burn liquid hydrogen and oxygen or kerosene and oxygen, have a tragically low specific impulse. They are the gas-guzzling, smoke-belching pickup trucks of the cosmos. They produce a fantastic fiery blast of power to lift against Earth's gravity, but they do it by throwing mass out the back end at a relatively modest speed. They carry their fuel and their oxidizer with them, and when that tank is empty, the party is over. The rocket stops accelerating, it coasts, and in the vacuum of space, coasting is fine if you're just going to Mars or Jupiter, because you can use clever gravity assists, and your initial explosive kick was enough. But for an interstellar journey, coasting is a death sentence. It means you're stuck at whatever final velocity you achieved when the fuel ran out. And that velocity, even for our fastest missions, is a crawl on the galactic scale. Let's take our current speed champion, the Parker Solar Probe. It used multiple gravity assists from Venus to dive repeatedly toward the Sun, and at its closest approach, it is moving at about 690,000 kilometers per hour. That sounds unbelievably fast, and it is. It is the fastest object humans have ever created. But let's convert that to a fraction of the speed of light. The speed of light is about 1,079,000,000 kilometers per hour. So the Parker Solar Probe, at its absolute peak, is travelling at about 0.00064 of light speed. That is a fraction so small it is barely a rounding error. At that speed, a trip to Proxima Centauri would take approximately 66,000 years. And here is the kicker. The Parker Solar Probe only achieves that incredible speed because it is falling deep into the Sun's gravity well. A trick you can only pull off when you are going inward, not outward. A probe launched directly out of the solar system, like the Voyagers, are moving at a much more pedestrian pace. The fundamental problem is that chemical rockets run out of fuel far, far too quickly to build up any meaningful interstellar velocity. Imagine you're in a car and you have 1 gallon of fuel. With that 1 gallon, you can accelerate to 60 miles per hour and then the engine dies. You will eventually roll to a stop. Now imagine you need to get across the entire continent. That 1 gallon of acceleration is meaningless. An interstellar spacecraft needs to be more like a train that can push continuously for years, not a car that guns it once and then glides. Chemical rockets are all about that one short, powerful gun. They are fireworks, a brilliant controlled explosion that is over in minutes. For a journey lasting millennia, you need a constant, gentle, sustainable push. You need an engine that can fire for years or even decades, slowly but surely increasing the ship's speed. This is where the dream of constant acceleration comes in, the kind you see in science fiction where the crew feels a comfortable artificial gravity from the steady thrust. But with chemical propulsion, constant acceleration is a physical impossibility. To accelerate even a modestly sized ship continuously, you would need to carry an amount of fuel that quickly becomes absurd. The mass of the fuel would be astronomical, literally. It is the tyranny of the rocket equation, which states that to go faster, you need more fuel, but the extra fuel itself has mass, so you need even more fuel to push asterisk the asterisk fuel and so on. The numbers escalate exponentially. To get a small probe to even 10% of light speed using chemical rockets, you would need a fuel tank larger than the planet itself. It is a comical, self-defeating proposition. The rocket would be almost entirely fuel, with a vanishingly small payload. and you would have to launch this mountain of explosive liquids from Earth, which is its own impossible hurdle. So we are stuck. The very technology that freed us from Earth's atmosphere becomes our cage when we look toward the stars. Chemical propulsion is perfect for breaking free of a gravity well, for hopping between planets within our solar system. It is a local technology. It is for visiting the other islands in your immediate archipelago, not for sailing across the open ocean. This is why all serious concepts for interstellar travel abandon chemical rockets entirely. They are a dead end. Scientists and engineers talk about things like nuclear thermal propulsion, where a reactor heats a propellant like hydrogen and blasts it out the back. That offers a better specific impulse, maybe double or triple that of chemical engines. But even that is likely only good for faster travel within the solar system out the back. That offers a better specific impulse, maybe double or triple that of chemical engines. But even that is likely only good for faster travel within the solar system. To make a dent in an interstellar journey, you need a leap of several orders of magnitude. You need technologies that are, as of now, entirely theoretical. Ideas like nuclear fusion rockets, where tiny pellets of hydrogen are fused in a reaction chamber and the resulting plasma is directed out a magnetic nozzle. Or even more exotic concepts like matter-antimatter annihilation, which would be the ultimate energy density, converting 100% of mass into energy. But these are not just engineering challenges, they're mountains of pure physics and material science we have not begun to climb. A fusion rocket requires us to achieve controlled, sustained fusion first, something we have been trying to do for decades on Earth in giant stationary facilities without net energy gain. Then we must miniaturize that technology to fit on a spacecraft, make it incredibly reliable for centuries, and find a way to feed it fuel. An antimatter rocket is even more fantastical. Antimatter is the most expensive substance ever conceived. We produce vanishingly small amounts, mere atoms at a time, in particle accelerators. Because antimatter annihilates upon contact with any normal matter, including the container walls. You would need perfect magnetic bottles with zero failures, because antimatter annihilates upon contact with any normal matter, including the container walls. You would need perfect magnetic bottles with zero failures for the entire pre-launch and mission duration. A single speck of dust hitting the storage chamber would be a catastrophic explosion. So while these ideas are fun to think about, they highlight the gap between what we have and what we need. Chemical propulsion is a candle. To reach another star, we need a sustained laser. The difference in energy efficiency is that stark. This is not a matter of incremental improvement. We're not going to get to the stars by building slightly bigger versions of the Saturn V rocket, or by refining our liquid hydrogen formulas. That path is closed. It leads nowhere. The failure of chemical propulsion forces a stark realization. Interstellar like light sails, pushed by powerful lasers stationed in the solar system, offer one alternative. But that introduces a whole new set of monumental challenges, like building a laser array the size of a continent and focusing its beam perfectly on a sail light years away. The point is, the rocket as we know it, the controlled explosion that inspired generations, has taken us as far as it can. It was the key that unlocked the door to our solar system. But on the other side of that door is a vast plain, and the key is not a vehicle for crossing it. We are like early sailors who perfected the canoe. With a canoe you can explore the river, you can even travel along the coastline. But you cannot cross an ocean in a canoe. No amount of paddling harder, or building a slightly larger canoe out of better wood, will change that. You need a different principle entirely, a sail or a steam engine, something that does not rely on your own muscle power. We are at that canoe stage of interstellar travel, celebrating the chemical rocket for getting us to the moon and sending probes to the planets is right and proper, but believing it can take us further is a misunderstanding of its nature. It is a technology of immense power but pitiful range. Its failure is not a commentary on our ingenuity, it is a statement of physical fact. The energy contained in chemical bonds is simply too weak, and the method of releasing it too wasteful for the task. So, when you see a rocket launch, with its glorious plume of fire and thunder, understand that you're watching the limits of human reach being defined in real time. That awesome spectacle represents both our greatest achievement in space and the very boundary we cannot cross with it. It is our farewell party as we leave Earth, and also the anchor that keeps us from sailing into the deep. Any journey to Proxima Centauri must begin by inventing an entirely new way to move, one that we have not yet discovered and may never discover. The chemical rocket is the prison we built for ourselves with the tools of our own liberation. It got us off the ground, but now we see that the ground was the only place it was ever designed to leave. So we are faced with a propulsion problem of unimaginable scale, a need to move in ways our current physics can barely describe. But let's play a thought experiment. Let's imagine we solve it. We discover the perfect engine, one that can push a spacecraft with a gentle, constant 1 gravity of acceleration for years on end. It uses some magical, weightless fuel, or perhaps it's that laser light sail system perfected. We start our journey. For months, then years, the ship keeps accelerating. The crew feels a comfortable, familiar pull toward the floor as the engine thrust mimics Earth's gravity. The speedometer, if there was one, keeps climbing. After 1 year of this constant push, the ship is moving at a sizable fraction of light speed. After 2 years, even closer, the dream seems within reach. Proxima Centauri is 4.2 light years away, but for the crew, thanks to a phenomenon called time dilation, the journey could feel much shorter. This is the promise often touted in science fiction, that relativity itself offers a cheat code for interstellar travel. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Relativity isn't a cheat code. It is the ultimate lockdown. It doesn't make the stars accessible. It formally declares them off-limits for anything made of matter like us. The theory of special relativity formulated by Albert Einstein over a century ago isn't just a theory. It is a fundamental framework of the universe that has been tested and verified to an incredible degree of precision. And it contains one non-negotiable rule. The speed of light in a vacuum is the universal speed limit. It is not a speed limit like a highway sign that you can break and risk a ticket. It is woven into the fabric of space and time. The reason is that as any object with mass accelerates, its relativistic mass increases. This isn't a mechanical problem like friction. It is a transformation of the object's very nature. The closer you get to the speed of light, the more massive you become. And because it takes more energy to accelerate a more massive object, the required energy input, the closer you get to the speed of light, the more massive you become. And because it takes more energy to accelerate a more massive object, the required energy input spirals toward infinity. To push even a single proton to the exact speed of light would require infinite energy. For a spacecraft, the energy required becomes impossibly large long before you even get close. So the first brutal truth is this. Light speed is not a goal to be achieved. It is an asymptotic barrier you can only approach. You can get to 90%, 99%, 99.999%. Each step closer requires exponentially more energy than the last, but you never, ever hit 100%. Your engine would have to be infinite, your fuel source infinite. This is not an engineering challenge, it is a law. So our hypothetical perfect engine? It would have to be not just perfect, but magical, capable of generating infinite output. That right there ends the discussion for any physical craft. The journey would take just over 4 years from the perspective of someone back on Earth, but for the crew, due to time dilation, it would feel like only a few weeks or months. They get there in a blink, explore, and come home. Perhaps to an Earth that has aged decades. This is the classic twin paradox, and it's often sold as a benefit. But this is where we confront the second brutal aspect of relativity. It is not just a passenger convenience. The universe balances the books. While time slows down for the speeding astronauts, the distance they have to cover also contracts from their perspective. Length in the direction of travel shrinks. So to them, the journey to Proxima Centauri might indeed seem short. But this subjective experience for the crew does not negate the objective, absolute reality of the distance and energy. It merely highlights the strange plasticity of space-time. Furthermore, this high-speed regime introduces horrific new engineering nightmares that have nothing to do with propulsion. Let's talk about the interstellar medium. Space is not a perfect vacuum. There are a few atoms of hydrogen per cubic centimetre and tiny motes of dust. At normal solar system speeds, these are a minor concern. At 99.9% of light speed, they become a barrage of apocalyptic energy. Each individual hydrogen atom turns into a bullet of intense radiation. They would hit the ship's hull like a constant stream of particles from a particle accelerator. The radiation dosage would be instantly lethal to any crew not protected by many meters of shielding, which of course adds impossible mass. Even a speck of dust, a micron-sized grain, would strike with the energy of a large bomb, likely vaporizing any portion of the ship it hit. So you now need a multi-meter thick shield of something like tungsten or lead at the front of your ship. But that shield itself, now part of the ship's mass, makes it even harder to accelerate to those speeds in the first place. The energy required just went up another 1,000-fold, and you haven't even accounted for the heat. All that kinetic energy from impacting particles turns into heat. The ship's hull would be glowing white hot, requiring a massive cooling system that also weighs tons. The problem compounds on itself in a vicious cycle, making the engineering solution for going fast also the thing that prevents you from going fast. But the relativity barrier is even more insidious than just speed and shielding. It creates a paradox of communication and purpose. Even if a crew could make the journey in their subjective lifetime, the Earth they left behind would experience the full, undilated time. A mission to a star 10 light-years away, even at 99% of light speed, means a round-trip communication delay of over 20 years from Earth's perspective. The crew would be utterly isolated. By the time they sent a message saying we arrived, decades would have passed at mission control. Any instructions, any updates, the crew would be utterly isolated. By the time they sent a message saying we arrived, decades would have passed at mission control. Any instructions, any updates on science or Earth politics would be from a bygone era. The mission becomes a one-way shout into the void, with an echo returning a generation later. This severs the cultural and scientific continuity that makes exploration meaningful to the civilization that funds it. Furthermore, relativity enforces a minimum travel time from the perspective of the universe at large. No signal, no information, no physical object can make the trip from Proxima Centauri to Earth in less than 4.2 years. That is the absolute minimum. It is built into the geometry of the cosmos. So the very concept of quick interstellar travel is an oxymoron. There is no quick. There is only less agonizingly slow. And for human beings with our biological clocks, even less slow is often still far too slow. The relativistic effects that supposedly help the crew only fast enough to make the journey subjectively short for the crew, and you face lethal radiation, catastrophic micrometeorite impacts, and energy requirements that dwarf the output of stars. The universe has us in a checkmate. Every move we think of is blocked by a fundamental law. We look at the equation and think we can bend it, but the equation is describing a wall. The speed of light is not a suggestion. It is the universe's way of maintaining causality, of ensuring that cause precedes effect. If we could go faster than light, we could in theory send messages back in time, creating paradoxes. The universe forbids this to keep its own logical structure consistent. We are bound by that logic. Our ships, our bodies, our hopes are all made of matter that obeys these rules. So when we talk about reaching Proxima Centauri, we are not just talking about building a faster engine. We're talking about rewriting the operating manual of reality. We would need to discover that our understanding of physics is completely wrong, or that there are loopholes like stable wormholes or warp drives that bend space rather than moving through it. But those concepts are speculative mathematics, not engineering blueprints. They require forms of matter with negative energy density that may not exist, or the ability to manipulate gravitational fields on a stellar scale. They are, for now, shapes in the fog. The sobering conclusion is that relativity doesn't offer a path to the stars. It explains in precise mathematical detail why the stars are forever out of reach for beings like us. It defines the prison walls. The vastness we discussed earlier is not just empty space. It is a space-time structure that is rigid and unforgiving. The energy barrier we face is not just about fuel, but about the infinite cost of approaching the cosmic speed limit. This combination is fatal to the dream. It means that any realistic mission must accept voyage times, measured in centuries or millennia, which introduces an entirely new set of impossible challenges centered on biology, society, and engineering durability over geological timescales. So the next time you hear someone talk about hopping over to another star system, remember that they are proposing an act that would require not just a new engine, but a repeal of a law of nature. The lightspeed barrier is the ultimate veto. It is the universe saying no in the most final way possible. Our chemistry-based rockets are inadequate, but even if they were 1,000,000 times more efficient, they would still slam into this relativistic wall long before reaching another sun. The problem is not the vehicle. The problem is the road. The road itself stretches and twists in such a way that the destination can never be reached in a human lifetime without confronting other, equally deadly consequences. It is a labyrinth with no exit. We are by our very physical constitution as material beings in a relativistic universe, local creatures. Our domain is the solar system. The stars are for looking at, for studying with our telescopes, for dreaming about, but they are not for visiting. That glittering canopy above us is not a map of future colonies. It is a beautiful, shimmering boundary. Relativity is the physics of that boundary. It tells us that the cosmos is structured to keep islands of matter separate. It is a beautiful, shimmering boundary. Relativity is the physics of that boundary. It tells us that the cosmos is structured to keep islands of matter separate. It is the reason the universe is mostly empty and mostly silent. It is the mechanism of solitude. To fight against it is not a challenge of technology. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of our place in the order of things. We are not being held back by a lack of ingenuity. We are being informed by the universe itself of a limit. And while human history is full of surpassing limits we once thought were absolute, this one is different. This one is written into the constants of nature, into the value of the speed of light itself. It is not a barrier like the sound barrier, which was a matter of engineering and materials. It is a foundational principle. So as we ponder the journey to Proxima Centauri, we must add this to the immense scale and the propulsion dead end. The laws of physics as we know them forbid the very concept of fast, crude interstellar travel of Earth. It forces us to consider only the bleak, long-duration scenarios, which themselves crumble under the weight of other impossibilities. The light-speed barrier isn't just a hurdle, it's the starting point for understanding why the dream dies. It transforms the question from how do we get there to why is it fundamentally impossible for us to get there? That is a much harder, but much more important question to answer. It directs our ambition inward, to our own solar system, and outward in the only way we truly can, with our minds and with our robotic probes that, being small and disposable, can theoretically be hurled at a fraction of light speed without concern for the inhabitable environment that humans require. The stars are for our machines, not for our flesh. That is the quiet, profound implication of Einstein's universe. So the physics of the universe forces us into a corner. We cannot travel fast, so any journey must be achingly slow. This means we are no longer talking about a mission, but about a migration. We are no longer discussing astronauts in a spacecraft, but colonists in a world ship. This is the realm of the multi-generational ship, the so-called Ark. It is the only conceivable way to bridge the millennia-long gap between stars without breaking the laws of physics, and it is arguably an even more impossible concept than faster-than-light travel because it asks us to solve every human problem we have ever faced and keep them solved perfectly for longer than our recorded history. Imagine a vessel that leaves Earth with a crew of perhaps 100 or 200 carefully selected pioneers. They are volunteers, scientists, engineers, farmers, doctors. They understand they will never see their destination. They will live out their lives aboard this closed ecosystem, have children and die. Their children will do the same, and their children's children for hundreds of generations. The people who finally arrive at Proxima Centauri will be the distant descendants of those who left, born in metal halls under artificial light, knowing Earth only as a myth, a story, a blue dot in their historical records. This transforms the endeavour from a heroic exploration into a profound and terrifying sociological experiment. The first and most immediate problem is the ship itself. It must be a perfect self-sustaining biosphere. It must recycle every drop of water, every molecule of oxygen, every bit of waste with near 100% efficiency for thousands of years. We have never come close to achieving this on Earth, let alone in a sealed can. Projects like Biosphere 2 in the 1990s showed how perilously fragile closed ecosystems are. Oxygen levels fluctuated dangerously, carbon dioxide spiked, pollinating insects died out, and aggressive vines took over. The mission descended into crew conflict and food shortages within 2 years. Now imagine that experiment, but you cannot open the doors. Not in 2 years, not in 200, not in 2000. A single failure in the water recycling system, a persistent mould in the hydroponic farms, a genetic blight that wipes out your staple crop, any of these could doom the entire civilization aboard. The ship must be absolutely perfect and remain perfect, with no spare parts from outside, for a duration longer than the lifespan of any human-made machine. The maintenance of this system would become the central religion of the ship, all-consuming focus for every generation. But even if you solve the engineering of air and water and food, you then face the biology of the crew. Maintaining a healthy human population over hundreds of generations in a closed group is a genetic nightmare. You start with a limited gene pool. To avoid catastrophic inbreeding, you need a large enough founding population. Estimates range from several hundred to many thousands of unrelated individuals. But every person is another mouth to feed, another body requiring space and resources, making the ship larger, heavier, and harder to propel. Then you must meticulously manage reproduction across centuries to preserve genetic diversity, essentially dictating who can have children with whom for the entire history of the voyage. This is a level of social control that is both ethically repugnant and practically unstable. Genetic drift would inevitably occur. Deleterious mutations would accumulate over generations. The humans who arrived might be physiologically different from those who left, potentially less suited to the mission's original goals or to life on a new planet. You're essentially breeding a new subspecies of humanity in a bottle, with all the risks that entails. Then comes the sociology, which is the most certain point of failure. What is the culture of this ship? What keeps these people motivated and unified for a purpose that none of them will live to see completed? The first generation has the clear memory of Earth, the mission fervour, the sense of historic purpose. The second generation grows up on stories. The 10th generation lives in a world where the walls are the only universe they have ever known. The engine hum is the background noise of their lives. The destination is a fairy tale, an abstract concept with no emotional weight. Why would they continue? What if, after 500 years, a majority decides the mission is pointless? What if they choose to turn the ship around, only to realise they lack the fuel or the knowledge? What if they simply stop maintaining the nuclear reactor or the life support systems? Human societies on Earth, with all the space and resources and cultural diversity we have, cannot maintain political stability or consistent purpose for more than a few centuries. We have revolutions, civil wars, cultural collapses, religious schisms. On a generation ship, any major conflict is an existential threat. A war aboard a starship would be the end. A dictatorship that mismanages resources would be the end. A loss of technical knowledge over the generations would be the end. The ship must be a utopia, immune to the tides of history forever. This is asking for a human nature that does not exist. The psychological toll is immense. These are humans, evolved for open skies, changing weather, vast horizons. They will live and die in a series of metal corridors and artificial parks under constant artificial lighting. The social pressures would be intense, with no privacy, no escape, no outside. The risk of societal neuroses, of deep psychological malaise, of simply going mad from the monotony and confinement is incredibly high. Furthermore, the technology itself becomes a trap. The ship launched with the best technology of its time, but technology on Earth would continue to advance. 1,000 years into the voyage, Earth, if it still exists in a recognisable form, might have developed new physics, new propulsion methods. A newer, faster ship launched centuries later could theoretically catch up to and pass the original arc, rendering its entire sacrifice obsolete. The arriving crew, with their millennia-old technology, might find the Proxima system already settled by humans who left later but arrived earlier. The absurdity of this is crushing. Finally, there is the profound ethical question. Do we have the right to consign generations of people to this life? They are born into a mission they did not choose, into a confined existence with a single inflexible goal. They are born as a means to an end, not as ends in themselves. Their entire civilization is a tool to deliver a payload, their own descendants, to a distant star. This violates a fundamental ethical principle about autonomy and consent. It is one thing for an individual to volunteer for a dangerous lifelong mission. It is entirely another to force that mission upon their great-great-great-grandchildren, who will have known nothing else. The generation ship is often portrayed as a noble solution, but in reality it is a dystopian prospect, a sentence passed down through time. When you combine these factors, the generation ship concept collapses under its own weight. It is not a workable plan, it is a thought experiment that reveals the boundaries of human endeavour. It shows that the challenges are not merely about distance and speed, but about biology, society, and the human spirit over scales of time we cannot comprehend. We struggle to maintain a functional space station for a couple of decades with constant resupply from Earth. The idea that we could scale that up to a fully independent, permanent, evolving civilization that remains stable for 1,000 times longer is a fantasy. It assumes we can freeze human nature, halt technological progress on Earth, and master closed ecology in a way we have never even approached. Each of these assumptions is false. Therefore, the multi-generational ship is not the answer to the interstellar travel problem. It is merely a way to articulate the problem in human terms. It translates the vast, silent barrier of space into a noisy, messy, tragic, human story of the inevitable decline. It tells us that, even if we could build the physical vessel, we could not build the society to inhabit it for the required time. The Ark would not sail, it would drift, or it would fracture, or it would forget its purpose long before it ever saw the light of a new sun. The timescales involved are simply incompatible with the human condition. We are short-lived, adaptive, chaotic beings. Our projects reflect that. We build cathedrals over centuries, but often with breaks, changes in plan, and different architects. A generation ship admits no breaks, no change in plan. Its course is set for a millennium. This rigidity is its doom. So, after confronting the sheer distance, the failure of chemical rockets, and the absolute law of the light speed barrier, we now add this. The inability of human societies to sustain a coherent, purposeful, and technically proficient civilization in a sealed environment over the required time frame. Each of these is a deal breaker on its own. Together, they form an insurmountable wall. The dream of reaching Proxima Centauri with living, breathing humans requires us to not only invent new physics, but to reinvent humanity itself into something patient, stable, and perfect. That is not a mission profile. It is a wish. And it is a wish that ignores who and what we actually are. We are explorers, yes, but we're explorers who need to see results within a lifetime, who need open space, who thrive on change and new stimuli. The generation ship is the antithesis of that. It is a prison sentence passed down through the ages. It is a testament not to our ambition, but to our failure to understand our own limitations. We look at the stars and think we must go there in person, but our biology, our psychology, and our sociology are telling us, loudly and clearly, that we cannot. This particular solution creates more problems than it solves, each one more intractable than the last. It is not a bridge across the interstellar gulf. It is a mirror held up to our own nature, showing us why the gulf is unbridgeable for creatures like us. Even if we could somehow solve the sociological riddle of the generation ship, crafting a perfect, stable society that lasts millennia, we would immediately smash into the next and perhaps most concrete wall, the sheer, grotesque amount of energy required to make the trip at all. This isn't about having enough solar panels or a big enough nuclear reactor. This is about needing to commandeer the energy output of entire civilizations for centuries. Let's move past chemical rockets. We know they're useless. Let's talk about the advanced stuff, the theoretical concepts we pin our hopes on. Fusion drives, antimatter engines, colossal laser sails. Surely with those, the energy problem is solved. The brutal truth is that these concepts only serve to highlight the enormity of the barrier. They don't magically overcome it. They're ideas that demand a scale of infrastructure and resource mobilization that is indistinguishable from magic. First, we have to understand what we're asking the engine to do. We need to accelerate a spacecraft, which even in a minimalist robotic probe configuration masses hundreds or thousands of tons, to a significant fraction of light speed. Not a tiny fraction like our current probes, but something meaningful, like 10 or 20%, to have any hope of a journey lasting less than tens of thousands of years. The kinetic energy involved in that motion is not linear, it increases with the square of the velocity. Pushing something to 10% of light speed requires 100 times more energy than pushing it to 1%. The numbers become astronomical, literally. Let's put it in terrestrial terms. The total annual energy consumption of all human civilization on Earth is a staggering figure, but it is a finite one. Now imagine funneling every single joule of that energy, every power plant, every car engine, every light bulb, every calorie of food, into a single project. Not for a year, but for decades, for a century. That scale of concentration is what a realistic interstellar probe might require just to get up to speed. We're not talking about building a power source for the ship. We are talking about building a power source for the asterisk acceleration phase asterisk that dwarfs our planetary economy. This is the first half of the problem, generating the energy. The second, even trickier half, is storing it on the spacecraft. You can't plug in an extension cord that's 4 light years long. The energy has to be carried along or beamed to the ship in a form that is both incredibly energy dense and controllable. This is where we run through the list of theoretical options and watch each one crumble under practical scrutiny. Take nuclear fusion, the darling of future energy dreams. In a fusion rocket, you would fuse atoms of deuterium and tritium, or perhaps helium-3, and direct the resulting superheated plasma out a magnetic nozzle for thrust. The specific impulse could be 10 times better than chemical rockets, but we've not yet achieved sustained energy-positive fusion on Earth in massive stationary reactors. The idea of miniaturizing that technology into a reliable, safe spacecraft engine that runs for years is a leap of faith over a canyon of unsolved physics and engineering. Even if we could, the energy density of fusion fuel, while fantastic, is still limited. The mass of fuel required to reach a high fraction of light speed might still be prohibitive due to the rocket equation. You need fuel to push the fuel. Then there's the concept of the laser sail, or light sail, pushed by a giant laser array stationed in the solar system, perhaps orbiting the sun. This seems elegant because the energy source stays home. The ship carries no fuel, just a large, ultralight reflective sail. But the infrastructure required is mind-boggling. You need a laser array with a power output comparable to the total sunlight falling on a continent. You need to focus that beam with perfect precision over light years of distance onto a sail that might only be a few kilometers wide. The sail must be flawless, impossibly thin, and able to withstand the beam's intensity without vaporizing. And this only works for the acceleration phase. To slow down at Proxima Centauri, you either need a matching laser array already there, which is impossible, or you have to carry a conventional rocket system to brake, which brings back the fuel mass problem. It's a one-way ticket to flying past your target. Now we come to the ultimate theoretical engine, matter-antimatter annihilation. This is the highest energy density process known to physics, converting 100% of mass into energy. In theory, it's perfect. A few grams of antimatter could provide the kick of a thermonuclear bomb in a controlled manner. But here, the practical problems are so extreme they border on the absurd. First, production. We currently produce antimatter in particle accelerators in amounts measured in nanograms or picograms at a cost of trillions of dollars per gram, and using far more energy to create it than we would ever get back. To produce even a single gram for a rocket would require the energy output of all human industry for years, perhaps centuries. Second, storage. Antimatter annihilates instantly upon contact with normal matter. You must contain it in a perfect magnetic bottle, suspended in a vacuum with 0 defects. Any failure, any power fluctuation, any microscopic breach, and your fuel supply and your ship vaporizes in a flash of gamma rays. The idea of storing kilograms of this material safely for a mission duration is a fantasy of control we cannot even approach. But let's step back from these exotic concepts and look at the raw physics of the request. To accelerate a modest 1,000-ton spacecraft, which is tiny for a generational ship but reasonable for a probe, to just 10% of light speed, the required kinetic energy is on the order of 10 to the 21 joules. That is a 1 followed by 21 zeros. To generate that energy, if you use the most efficient method conceivable, you would still need to process an amount of fuel whose mass is a significant fraction of the spacecraft's own mass, and you have to carry that fuel, which means more energy to push the fuel. The rocket equation is a merciless accountant. For a fusion rocket with a halfway decent exhaust velocity, the mass ratio, the ratio of initial fueled mass to final dry mass, might need to be 1,000 to 1 or more. So your 1,000-ton probe needs to start out as a 1 million-ton fueled behemoth, and you have to launch that million tons from Earth, or assemble it in space. The construction project becomes a planetary-scale endeavour. This is why the energy barrier is often called prohibitive. It prohibits the project by making it the only thing a civilization does. It would require a global, multi-century commitment to resource extraction, construction, and energy generation with no conceivable economic return. No society facing the daily needs of its people would ever undertake it. It is the definition of a mega-project that collapses under its own logistical weight. Furthermore, this energy requirement interacts horribly with all the other problems. Needs shielding against radiation and micrometeoroids. That adds mass, which increases the energy needed exponentially. Want to carry humans and a closed ecosystem? The mass skyrockets, and so does the energy. The problem compounds. There is no free lunch. Every gram of comfort, safety or redundancy multiplies the energy cost. So when we dream of starflight, we are dreaming of harnessing powers we equate with natural forces, the output of stars, or the focused fury of a star's light across interstellar distances. We are not talking about building an engine. We are talking about building a cosmic artifact. The energy wall shows us that the challenge is not merely technical, but civilizational. It asks, could humanity ever unite to become a single project-oriented entity for 1,000 years, pouring all its surplus into a single hole in the sky? History says no. Our economics says no. Our fragmented, competitive, short-term political systems scream no. Even a highly advanced, unified planetary civilization might look at the numbers and conclude it's a foolish waste of resources when the same energy could be used to transform its own solar system, building orbital habitats, terraforming planets, and creating a paradise at home. The interstellar dream fails the cost-benefit analysis at a galactic level. In the end, the energy barrier translates the vast, silent distance into a language of economics and engineering we can understand. It is too expensive. It costs too much in time, material, and focused will. It is the universe's way of putting a price tag on the stars, and the price is everything you have and more. This isn't a challenge to be met by smarter engineers. It is a fundamental condition of a universe where mass and energy are equivalent, and acceleration has a real, tangible cost. It means that the stars are not just far away, they are locked behind a vault door, and we do not possess, and may never possess, the combination. The energy required is the combination, and it is written in numbers so large they describe not a mission, but a kind of madness. So we add this to our growing list. Even if we could build a ship that lasts millennia, and fill it with a society that remains sane and purposeful, we could never give it the push it needs to get there in any meaningful time frame. The fuel tank would be larger than the world. The power plant would dwarf our sun. The project would consume us. It is a sobering check on our ambition, a reminder that the cosmos is not only big, but it is also inherently resistant to crossing. The energy barrier is that resistance quantified. It is the final practical veto from the realm of physics and engineering, standing alongside the sociological and biological vetoes. Together, they form a consensus of impossibility. The dream of reaching Proxima Centauri with a craft from Earth, robotic or crude, stumbles on distance, shatters on propulsion physics, and then is incinerated in the furnace of its own energy requirements. What remains is not a plan, but a longing. And that longing may have to be satisfied not by going there, but by accepting that some lights are meant only to be seen, not touched. The energy wall ensures that for beings like us, bound by the laws of thermodynamics and limited resources, the stars will forever be on the other side of a mirror, brilliant and forever out of reach. We can study their light, decode their secrets, and dream of their worlds, but we cannot pay the fare to visit. The ticket price is the total output of a civilization, and that is a price no sane civilization would ever pay for a one-way trip to a single, probably hostile speck of rock. This is the economic, physical, and practical heart of the argument against interstellar travel. It is not about will or spirit, it is about the unforgiving arithmetic of energy, an arithmetic that declares the project null and void before it even begins. So the energy problem seems almost abstract, a matter of impossible numbers on a spreadsheet. But space itself is not abstract. It is a physical environment, and a brutally hostile one. We often think of it as a pure empty vacuum, a clean nothingness that just needs to be crossed. That is a dangerous illusion. Interstellar space is far from empty. It is a shooting gallery filled with invisible high-velocity shrapnel and a constant sleet of atomic bullets. This is not a minor engineering detail. It is a showstopper that erodes any hope for a vessel surviving a journey lasting centuries, let alone millennia. Think of it as the universe's version of erosion, but instead of wind and water, it is a relentless sandblasting by particles travelling at a substantial fraction of the speed of light. The first and most insidious of these hazards is galactic cosmic radiation. These are not your average rays from the sun, which are bad enough. These are atomic nuclei, mostly protons but some heavier elements like iron, accelerated to unimaginable speeds by supernova explosions and other violent cosmic events. They zip through the galaxy, and they do not stop for anything. When one of these particles, travelling at near light speed, slams into a spacecraft hull, it doesn't just bounce off. It creates a cascade of secondary particles, a shower of radiation that can fry delicate electronics, and more critically, shred the DNA inside every cell of a human body. On Earth, we are protected by a thick atmosphere and a magnetic field that deflects most of this. In a spaceship, you're naked. The cumulative dose over a multi-year trip to Mars is a serious concern. Over a multi-century journey, it is a death sentence. Even with shielding, the problem is monstrous. To block this radiation effectively, you need mass, lots of it. Water, polyethylene, or better yet, thick slabs of lead or tungsten. But remember the rocket equation from earlier? Mass is the enemy. Every kilogram of shielding requires more energy to accelerate. You could, in theory, build a ship with walls several meters thick, but then your ship is now so monstrously heavy that attaining any useful speed becomes an even more ludicrous energy proposition. There is a concept called active shielding, using magnetic fields or plasma to deflect charged particles, much like Earth's magnetosphere does. But generating a powerful, stable magnetic field large enough to envelope a starship and powering it continuously for centuries is another energy nightmare of its own. The systems could fail, they would require immense superconductors and cooling, and they offer no protection at all against neutral particles or the secondary radiation produced when cosmic rays strike the hull. So, you're caught. Passive shielding makes the ship too heavy to move, active shielding makes it too power-hungry to sustain. Meanwhile, the crew is slowly accumulating radiation damage. Over generations, this would mean elevated cancer rates, potential genetic mutations passed down, and a general degradation of health. The ship's population would be slowly poisoned by the universe itself. But cosmic rays are just the background static. The more dramatic threat comes from micrometeoroids and interstellar dust. Again, space seems empty, but it is sprinkled with fine particles. In our solar system, we have maps of the denser dust clouds. Between stars, the density is far lower, but it is not zero. A grain of dust out there might be the size of a smoke particle or a grain of sand. At the speeds required for interstellar travel, even a modest 10% of light speed, that tiny grain carries the kinetic energy of a bomb. Kinetic energy increases with the square asterisk of velocity. So a particle that would merely pit the window of the International Space Station, which orbits at about 8 kilometers per second, becomes a weapon of mass destruction at 30,000 kilometers per second. A 1 gram particle, a small pebble, at 10% light speed hits with the energy of roughly 100 kilograms of TNT. It would vaporize a chunk of the ship instantly. A microscopic grain, 1 micron in size, could blast a crater the size of your fist. Now space is big, and the chance of hitting a pebble is astronomically small. But the chance of being hit by thousands of microscopic grains over a multi-light year journey is almost a certainty. It is a statistical guarantee. Your ship will be sandblasted. Over centuries, this constant peppering would degrade external systems, solar panels, sensors, and critical components. A lucky hit, or rather an unlucky one, could strike a vital area. A coolant line, a power conduit, the propulsion system. One tiny particle in the wrong place could end the mission. And how do you shield against that? You need a Whipple shield, like on the International Space Station. Layers of material that vaporize the particle on impact, spreading out the energy. But for interstellar velocities you need many, many layers, and they must be spaced apart. This adds, again, mass and complexity. You're essentially building an armoured battleship, which again runs headlong into the propulsion and energy barriers. The combination of these two hazards, the silent, penetrating radiation and the occasional hypervelocity impacts, creates an environment of sustained, inescapable degradation. There is no calm in interstellar space. It is a constant slow-motion storm. Your ship is not just travelling, it is weathering, and you cannot pull over for repairs. You cannot send out a maintenance crew to patch the hull. Every system must be not only redundant, but self-repairing for thousands of years. The wear and tear is not a maybe, it is a fundamental law of the journey. This has profound implications for the generation ship idea. You're asking a closed, fragile biological and mechanical system to remain intact while being continuously irradiated and sporadically pounded by microscopic cannon fire. The psychological impact alone would be crushing. Imagine the constant low-level anxiety, the occasional shudder from a dust impact, the knowledge that your protection is slowly being eaten away and there is nothing you can do about it. For a robotic probe, the problem is slightly different but no less severe. Electronics are especially vulnerable to cosmic rays. A single particle can flip a bit in a computer's memory, causing a command error, a single event upset. Over time, this accumulation of bit flips corrupts data and software. Radiation-hardened electronics exist, but they are slower, less capable, and still not immune over century-long timescales. The probe's brain would slowly go senile. Its memory of its mission, its instructions, its very identity could degrade into nonsense. It might forget what it is supposed to do when it finally arrives. So, we must add this to our list of deal breakers. Even if we solve propulsion and energy, even if we create a stable society in a can, the can itself will be chewed up and filled with a toxic radioactive environment long before it reaches its destination. Space is not a highway, it is an abrasive fluid. Crossing it requires a vessel of such resilience and redundancy that its mass would once again become the primary obstacle. This is the cruel irony. The very measures needed to survive the journey make the journey impossible to begin with. Thick shielding equals impossible mass. Thin shielding equals dead crew and failed systems. There is no comfortable middle ground because the environment is unrelenting and the travel times are inhumanly long. This challenge also starkly highlights the difference between interplanetary and interstellar travel. Within our solar system, journeys are measured in years. Radiation shielding can be designed for a specific mission profile. Micrometeoroid risk is manageable with known materials and Whipple shields. The environment, while hostile, is one we can engineer for on human timescales. But scaling that engineering up to millennia is not a linear problem. It is a qualitative leap into impossibility. It is the difference between building a boat to cross a river and building a submarine to sit at the bottom of the ocean for 1,000 years. The materials science simply does not exist, and may never exist, to create a hull that can withstand both the internal pressure of a biosphere and the external bombardment of cosmic rays and dust for that long without degradation. Furthermore, all of this assumes we know the detailed makeup of the interstellar medium along our specific route. We do not. There could be clouds of denser gas, regions with higher dust concentrations from ancient stellar events. Our ship might sail blindly into a corridor that is particularly dirty, accelerating its own erosion. We cannot scout the path ahead. The first ship is the pathfinder, and if it fails due to an unexpected environmental hazard, we might never know why. This adds an element of fatal unpredictability. In essence, the interstellar environment acts as a universal corrosive. It attacks on multiple fronts, the atomic level with radiation, the material level with impacts, and the digital level with bit flips. No single system we design is immune to all three forms of decay simultaneously over such timescales. Entropy is not just a concept in deep space, it is an active, aggressive force. The universe tends toward disorder, and a starship is a fantastically ordered system. The journey is a battle against entropy that we are guaranteed to lose given enough time. And for a trip to Proxima Centauri at any realistic speed, there is always enough time. The erosion is slow, but it is inexorable. This is why probes like the Voyagers, while now in interstellar space, are not proof that interstellar travel is possible. They are proof of the opposite. They are simple, rugged, and have no delicate human cargo. Yet, they are slowly dying. Their power sources decay, their instruments fail, their trajectories are passive. They are not travelling to a star. They are drifting, and they will be inert, dead husks long before they ever remotely approach another solar system. They are monuments to our reach, but also to its limits. So, when we compile the reasons we will never reach Proxima Centauri, the raw hostility of the medium itself must be near the top. It is the practical, day-to-day reality that kills the dream. It's not a single catastrophic event, but a slow, guaranteed death by a million tiny cuts and a billion radioactive whispers. It means that the spacecraft, as a physical object, has a functional shelf life that is likely far shorter than the journey requires. We cannot build for 100,000 years. We do not know how. The materials do not exist. The shielding technology does not exist. The combination of these environmental factors with the earlier problems creates an inescapable trap. The need for speed to shorten the journey conflicts with the increased danger of impacts at high speed. The need for shielding to protect against radiation and impacts conflicts with the need for low mass to achieve speed. It is another vicious cycle, another set of equations with no favourable solution. The cosmos is not just big and empty. It is big and full of things that want to kill your ship. This realization forces a final, pragmatic conclusion. Biological beings, with our fragile water-based chemistry and susceptibility to radiation, are perhaps the worst possible cargo for an interstellar journey. We are the most difficult thing in the universe to send between stars. The environment itself seems designed to filter us out, so yet another door slams shut. Not only is the distance immense, the propulsion inadequate, the energy unobtainable, and the social structure untenable, but the very road is lined with razors and poison. The path to the stars is a gauntlet that no material we know of can run for long enough. It is the ultimate endurance test, and we are not built to endure it, nor are our creations. They, like us, have a lifespan, and the journey demands immortality. That is a demand the universe seems structured to refuse, and even with perfect management, the lack of new genetic material from outside would make the population increasingly susceptible to novel diseases or environmental shifts within the ship. A single pathogen, evolving inside the closed system, could wipe out everyone if they all share similar genetic weaknesses. Our biology is not designed for such isolation. Psychologically, the challenge is perhaps the most profound. Humans need novelty, purpose, and a connection to something larger than themselves. The first generation might have the mission's grand goal. The 10th generation lives in a metal world they did not build, heading toward a dot of light they've never seen up close, for reasons that are historical legend. Their entire universe is a finite set of corridors, recycled air, and artificial scenery. The outside is a lethal vacuum filled with deadly radiation. There is no weather, no natural landscapes, no unbounded horizons. The cognitive effects of such sensory monotony and permanent confinement are not fully understood, but studies on isolation, from Antarctic winter rovers to submarine crews, show risks of depression, anxiety, interpersonal conflict, and a decline in cognitive function. Over centuries, this could manifest as a collective societal malaise, a loss of purpose, or a descent into destructive superstition or factionalism. The ship's culture would have to be meticulously engineered to prevent this. But can you engineer meaning? Can you mandate curiosity and hope for 1,000 years? Our minds evolved to solve immediate problems in a rich, changing environment. A starship is the opposite, a static, controlled, and ultimately limited environment, where all the major problems were solved by ancestors long dead. The psychological adaptation required may be beyond our innate capacities. Furthermore, consider the simple act of sleep. Our circadian rhythms are tied to the 24-hour light-dark cycle of our planet. On a ship with no sunrises, maintaining this rhythm requires artificial lighting regimes. Disruption of circadian rhythms is linked to a host of health issues, including metabolic disorders, mood disturbances, and impaired cognitive function. Keeping an entire population in sync for generations under artificial light is a subtle but persistent stressor. The human body is a collection of interconnected, fragile systems. Prolonged spaceflight, even with gravity, exposes fractures in that system we're only beginning to understand. For instance, the fluid shift toward the head in microgravity is now suspected to cause lasting changes to the structure of the eyes and optic nerves in many astronauts, a condition called spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome. What other slower-acting syndromes would emerge over decades that our 6-month space station missions have not yet revealed? The generation ship is a gamble on a biological unknown. We're essentially attempting to create a new evolutionary path for Homo sapiens, selecting for traits that are suited to starship life, whether we intend to or not. The humans who disembark at Proxima Centauri might be physically and cognitively different from Earth humans. They might be weaker in certain ways, adapted to their artificial world, and perhaps poorly suited to the gravity and environment of a new planet, which itself might be hostile. This leads to the ultimate biological paradox. The very journey meant to preserve humanity might end up transforming it into something that is no longer human as we understand it. The vessel may arrive, but the people inside could be ghosts of who left, shaped more by the steel walls of their ark than by the legacy of Earth. When we add this biological imperative to the list of obstacles, the case becomes overwhelming. The distance is astronomical, our propulsion is primitive, the energy required is obscene, the environment is corrosive, and now we understand that the cargo, us, is perishable in ways we cannot fix. We cannot engineer new instincts. We cannot redesign the fundamental human need for connection to a living world, for variety, for a sense of open-ended possibility. A starship, no matter how large, is a finite puzzle. Once solved, it becomes a cage. Our biology, shaped by the open savannas and forests of Earth, rebels at the thought of a permanent cage, even one that moves among the stars. The data from our brief forays into space is a warning, not an encouragement. It tells us that every month in space is a struggle against decay. Framing a multi-century journey as a solution is like suggesting that because you can hold your breath for a minute, you can therefore live underwater if you just try harder. The gap is not one of degree, but of kind. Human spaceflight within the solar system will always be a fragile, high-maintenance endeavour. Extrapolating that to an interstellar scale is a category error. It mistakes our temporary assisted presence in space for a capability to live there permanently. We are visitors, wearing sophisticated life support suits that happen to be spacecraft. The generation ship concept asks us to forget we are wearing the suit, to pretend the walls of the suit are the walls of the universe, and to birth new generations inside it. Biology says no. Our bodies will remind us, generation after generation, that this is not our home. The slow accumulation of physiological and psychological stress would inevitably undermine the social and technical stability of the mission. A society perpetually battling its own decay cannot focus on a distant goal. Its goal becomes mere survival, and eventually that fight will be lost. Therefore, the biological dilemma is the most intimate of all the barriers. It is not about the cold physics of the universe, but about the warm, fragile, and complex reality of what we are. The stars may be forever out of reach because we, in our current fleshy form, are simply not built for the trip. We are creatures of Earth, through and through. Our destiny, if it is among the stars, may not involve taking our bodies with us. But that is a different and even more unsettling thought. For now, the evidence suggests that a journey to Proxima Centauri is a biological impossibility. The human organism cannot be sustained in a healthy, vibrant, and purposeful state for the required duration under the required conditions. We would break long before the ship would, and a broken crew means a dead mission, so we must add this to the column of impossibilities. We are the problem. Our own magnificent Earth-evolved biology is the final, uncrossable frontier. The biological fragility of the crew leads directly to the next catastrophic hurdle, keeping them alive. It is not enough to shield them from radiation and give them artificial gravity. They need to eat, drink, and breathe every single day for thousands of years, with no resupply, no fresh air, and no new soil. This is the problem of the closed ecological life support system, and it is a problem we have spectacularly failed to solve on Earth, let alone in a tin can hurtling through the void. We have never created a truly self-sustaining ecosystem, not even a small one. It can last for more than a couple of years without breaking down. The idea that we could scale this to a city-sized starship and expect it to run flawlessly for centuries is perhaps the most arrogant of all our interstellar assumptions. Think about what we're asking for. A starship must be a perfect miniature Earth. It must take the vast, complex and resilient biosphere of our planet, with its oceans, forests, microbial life, atmospheric cycles, and geological processes, and cram it into a sealed metal container. Then it must keep every component of that system in perfect dynamic balance while subjecting it to artificial lighting, recycled water, and the subtle poisoning of its own waste products. The most famous attempt at this was Biosphere 2, a 3-acre glass-enclosed structure in the Arizona desert built in the late 1980s. It housed 8 people for 2 years. It was a catastrophic failure from an ecological standpoint. Oxygen levels dropped dangerously because soil bacteria consumed it faster than the plants could produce it. requiring emergency injection from the outside. Carbon dioxide levels spiked erratically. Vines choked out other plants. Pollinators died out. Cockroaches and ants proliferated. The crew suffered from chronic hunger and oxygen deprivation, and factional conflicts broke out. The mission was kept from total collapse only by hidden, unplanned interventions. If this happened in a massive Earth-based structure, with some external power and monitoring over a mere 2-year period, what hope is there for a vessel 1,000 times more confined, over 1,000 times longer, with no possibility of opening a window or pumping in fresh air? The starship's life support cannot be a collection of separate mechanical systems, a water recycler here, a carbon dioxide scrubber there. It has to be a living, breathing and evolving entity, and living things are messy, unpredictable and prone to collapse. Let's break down the individual cycles. The air. Plants absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen through photosynthesis. Humans and other animals do the reverse. This seems like a neat closed loop, but it is not that simple. The balance is incredibly delicate. The amount of plant life must precisely match the respiratory needs of the animal life, including humans, their livestock, and a host of necessary microbes. But plants don't just produce oxygen, they also consume it at night through respiration. Their growth rates change, they get diseases, they can be affected by the artificial climate inside the ship. A blight that wipes out a significant portion of your algae vats or hydroponic wheat could tip the oxygen balance irreversibly. Furthermore, gases leak. Trace gases build up from off-gassing materials, from industrial processes, from human metabolism. On Earth, these are diluted in a massive atmosphere or processed by untold billions of organisms in soil and water. On the ship, they accumulate. Ethylene from ripening fruit can stunt plant growth. Ammonia from waste can become toxic. The system needs to scrub these trace contaminants constantly, but our technology for doing so perfectly over centuries does not exist. The water cycle. Every drop of water from drinking, irrigation, sweat and urine must be recovered, purified and reused with near 100% efficiency. Even a loss of 0.1% per day would drain the ship's reserves in a few years. Our current water recovery systems on the International Space Station are very good, but they are not perfect, and they require regular maintenance and replacement of filters and components. These components have a finite lifespan. You would need to manufacture or regenerate every filter, every membrane, every chemical agent from within the closed system for millennia. The failure of a single main water purification unit could be a civilization-ending event. The food cycle. This is agriculture under the most stressful conditions imaginable. You must grow all your calories and nutrients in artificial light, with recycled nutrients in a pest and disease-controlled environment forever. Soil, if you use it, becomes depleted and must be replenished from within the system. Hydroponic solutions must be perfectly balanced. You need a diverse diet to prevent malnutrition, which means managing dozens of crop species, each with its own needs and vulnerabilities. You also need a source of protein, perhaps fish from aquaculture tanks or insects or cultured meat. Each of these subsystems is another layer of complexity, another web of dependencies. A parasite could wipe out your tilapia stock. A fungus could destroy your soybean crop. There is no backup, no seed bank to request a resupply from. You are it. Then there is the waste cycle. All solid and liquid waste must be broken down and its constituent elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, fed back into the agricultural system. This means advanced composting, microbial digesters, or chemical processing. These systems can clog, they can become toxic, they can produce methane or hydrogen sulfide gas. The microbial ecology of the waste processing system is its own fragile world, susceptible to being overrun by a single aggressive bacterial strain. The entire ship is a network of thousands of interconnected, fragile loops. It is the ultimate Jenga tower. Remove one block, say the specific bacteria that fix nitrogen in your soil simulant, and the entire structure of life could come crashing down, and you would not know which block was critical until it was gone. This is the nightmare of unforeseen interactions. Over centuries, small imbalances compound. A metal slowly leaches from the hull into the water supply, reaching toxic levels after 10 generations. A plasticizer from a piece of equipment slowly off-gasses and inhibits plant reproduction. The genetic diversity of your food crops slowly dwindles due to accidental selection, making them more vulnerable to a pathogen. The system is not static, it evolves. The microbes evolve. The plants evolve. The unintended consequences are impossible to predict. We are not omniscient ecologists. We cannot model every variable in a living starship for 1,000 years. The Biosphere 2 experiment proved that our best, most thoughtful attempt quickly spiralled into chaos. A generation ship is Biosphere 2 but smaller, farther from help and required to last not 2 years but 2,000. The very concept relies on a level of control over nature that we do not possess and likely never will. It assumes we can build a machine that is also a forest, a river, and a farm, and that this machine will never experience a critical failure in any of its millions of biological and mechanical components. This is a fantasy of total control. In reality, complex systems fail. They fail on Earth with all its buffers and redundancies. They will certainly fail in the stripped-down, high-stakes environment of a starship. The proponents of such arcs will point to future technology, to AI monitoring and managing the biosphere. But an AI can only control what it can measure and what it understands. Our understanding of deep ecological interplay is still primitive. An AI cannot invent a new nitrogen-fixing bacterium if the one you brought goes extinct. It cannot stop a novel virus that evolves in your closed system. The problem is not management. It is the inherent instability of small, closed ecosystems. They are not resilient. Earth's biosphere is resilient because it is unimaginably vast, ancient and diverse. A starship biosphere is tiny, new and genetically limited. It has no depth to absorb shocks. This challenge alone suffocates the generation ship concept. It adds an impossible requirement to the already impossible list. You must not only be perfect engineers and sociologists, you must be perfect gods of a miniature world. You must command the cycles of life and death, of decay and rebirth, with absolute precision for longer than the pyramids have stood. One crack in the glass, one slow poison, one missing microbe, and everything dies in the dark, long before the destination is even a visible disk in the sky. A closed ecosystem is not a life support system, it is a time bomb. Its timer is set by the statistical certainty of an unplanned event, a disease, a mutation, a mechanical fault, over a sufficiently long period. For a journey lasting millennia, that statistical certainty approaches 100%. It will fail. Therefore, the dream of a living, breathing human community travelling to the stars shatters on this simple, brutal fact of biology and systems ecology. We cannot build a world that small and expect it to live. We are creatures of a giant, forgiving, open world. Our survival depends on that openness, on the constant exchange of energy and materials on a planetary scale. To enclose ourselves is to sentence ourselves to a slow, inevitable ecological death. The Starship Ark, therefore, is not a vessel of salvation, but a beautifully crafted coffin set on a course for a grave it will never reach. This reality forces a final, stark conclusion. If humans are to have a presence among the stars, it cannot be as biological entities needing a full Earth-like biosphere. We would have to be something else, something far less fragile with far simpler needs. But for us, as we are now, the requirement for a perfect, perpetual, closed ecological system is a wall just as impassable as the lightspeed barrier. It tells us that the Earth is not just our home, it is our life support, and we cannot take it with us. We are tethered here by the very air we breathe and the food we eat, bound in a cycle that cannot be miniaturized and launched. The interstellar void is not just empty space between stars. It is a place where the cycles of life as we know them cannot be sustained. It is a place for machines and data, not for forests and children. The failure of the closed ecosystem concept is the ultimate ecological veto on human interstellar travel, a reminder that our biology is inseparable from our planet's biosphere. We're not just visiting this Earth, we are a part of it, and leaving it means leaving a part of ourselves that we cannot replicate in a bottle. Faced with the utter biological impossibility of sending humans in fragile cans of air and water, the conversation inevitably pivots to a more sterile, logical alternative. Why send the messy humans at all? Why not send machines? And not just any machines, but self-replicating machines. The legendary von Neumann probes. The idea is seductively elegant. You launch a single sophisticated robotic craft towards a star system. Upon arrival, it uses local resources, asteroids, moons, planetary material, to build copies of itself. These copies then launch to other star systems and repeat the process, creating an exponentially growing wave of exploration across the galaxy. Eventually, a probe arrives at Proxima Centauri, builds an infrastructure, and perhaps even fabricates human bodies from stored genetic data, or waits for uploaded human minds to be beamed as information. It seems to solve every problem. No life support, no generation ships, no psychological decay. The galaxy gets explored, and humanity, in some form, gets there. This is the ultimate techno-fantasy bypass, but it is a fallacy. It does not solve the problem of human interstellar travel. It redefines the problem into something else entirely, and in doing so reveals a whole new set of impossible hurdles. First, let's be clear about what a von Neumann probe actually is. It is not a magic box. It is a factory capable of mining, refining, and fabricating complex components in an unknown environment, using unpredictable raw materials to assemble a perfect copy of itself, including its own sophisticated computer brain. This is a level of robotics, artificial intelligence, and material science that is godlike. You cannot build a machine that can fix a car by itself in a controlled garage, let alone one that can rebuild itself from scratch using the random rocks of an alien solar system. The probe would need to contain the equivalent of an entire industrial civilization's worth of technology, miniaturized into a single package that can survive a millennia-long journey and then spring into action. The complexity is unimaginable. Every nut, every bolt, every microprocessor, every sensor, every line of code in the new probe must be fabricated from raw elements. The probe would need to be a master of every physical science, geology to assess resources, chemistry to process them, metallurgy to create alloys, advanced manufacturing like 3D printing at the atomic scale, and an AI with general intelligence to handle the millions of unforeseen problems. This isn't an engineering challenge. It is the definition of a technological singularity, a point where technology becomes indistinguishable from magic. But let's assume we achieve this magic. We launch our miracle probe. It faces all the same interstellar hazards we discussed earlier. Radiation, micrometeoroids, cosmic rays frying its delicate circuits over centuries. It must survive intact, not just as a passive payload, but as a dormant factory that can wake up perfectly functional after 10,000 years in the deep freeze. Then it arrives at, say, Proxima Centauri. The plan hinges on the assumption of local resources. But what resources? We have no detailed mineralogical survey of the asteroids or planets in that system. Our probe might arrive to find that the available metals are locked in refractory oxides it cannot reduce, or that critical elements like phosphorus or rare earth metals are simply absent in accessible forms. It might land on a world with a crushing atmosphere or no solid surface. The idea that any star system will have the convenient, diverse, and easily processed resources needed for such astronomical self-replication is a guess, and probably a bad one. The probe could starve to death in a resource desert, unable to find the specific ingredients needed to build even a single screw for its copy. Next is the timescale. Even with self-replication, the probe spread at a speed limited by travel time between stars and the time needed to replicate. Each replication cycle could take centuries. Mining, building, testing. The exponential wave across the galaxy is still a process taking hundreds of thousands to millions of years. This does not get asterisk as asterisk to Proxima Centauri any faster. It simply creates a robotic infrastructure over cosmic time. The original civilization that launched the first probe would be long gone, transformed or extinct. By the time a probe even reports back from the nearest star, the project loses all connection to its creators, becoming a mindless cosmic ant colony spreading for no purpose any human would recognize. Then there is the communication problem. The probe can send data back, but over 4 light years that's a minimum 8-year round trip for a simple question and answer. For more distant probes, the latency stretches to centuries. You cannot remotely guide a complex autonomous replication process with that kind of delay. The probe is on its own. If it encounters a problem its programming didn't foresee, it fails. There is no mission control to help. It is a one-shot gamble with a godlike machine you built but cannot control or fix. But the most profound failure of the von Neumann probe concept is philosophical, and it strikes at the very heart of why we dream of the stars in the first place. The proposal is often tacked on as a solution to human travel. The probes will build a habitat and then we'll go there, or they'll reconstruct us. This does not bridge the interstellar gap for *US*. It sidesteps it. If a probe reconstructs a human being from a stored genome or a transmitted mind file, the person who steps out on that new world is not the person who left Earth. They're a copy, a clone, a reconstruction. They may have the memories, but they did not make the journey. The continuous thread of conscious experience that began on Earth is broken. The original person remained on Earth and died. This is not travel. It is teleportation by destruction and copying, with the added horror of a multi-millennium delay. It reduces human beings to pure information, a pattern that can be transmitted and stamped out at the destination. But is that really humanity reaching the stars? Or is it just our blueprint, our ghost? For the individual who wants to go to experience the journey and the arrival, the von Neumann probe offers nothing. It offers only death on Earth and the creation of a stranger under an alien sun who happens to have your face and memories. The dream of crossing space is replaced by the reality of faxing a copy. Furthermore, the entire concept is terrifyingly risky on a galactic scale. A single error in the replication protocol, a mutation in its code, could turn the exponential wave from one of exploration into a cancer. A berserk replicator, consuming systems to build more of itself without purpose, is a classic science fiction horror for a reason. We would be unleashing an uncontrollable, self-replicating entity into a galaxy we do not understand, with consequences lasting billions of years. The ethical burden is staggering. So when we pull back and look at the von Neumann probe idea as a solution to human interstellar travel, we see it for what it is, a sleight of hand. It replaces the intractable problems of biology, propulsion and time with the equally intractable problems of godlike robotics, uncertain resources and philosophical identity. It does not solve the core problem, it changes the subject. It says, forget about sending humans, let's send our ideas instead. And that is a valid, perhaps the only valid form of interstellar exploration, sending information gatherers. But we must be honest and call it what it is. It is not a method for humans to travel to the stars. It is a method for our machines to go, and for some data to maybe come back. The human body, the human conscious experience, remains firmly, irrevocably behind. The probe idea also subtly admits defeat on all the fronts we've discussed. It concedes that human bodies are too fragile, generation ships are too unstable, and the energy required to send anything massive is too great. So it proposes sending the smallest possible seed, a blueprint. But that blueprint must be so incomprehensibly complex that it might as well be a human. The energy saved in propulsion is spent 1,000,000 times over in the staggering intellectual effort to create such a self-replicating automaton in the first place. In the end, the von Neumann probe is a mirror. It reflects our desire to project our presence into the cosmos, but it also reflects our deep understanding that our physical animal selves are not cut out for the task. It is a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, but also a confession of our biological limitations. It is not a practical roadmap. It is a thought experiment that demonstrates the boundary between the possible and the fantastical. The actual, achievable version of this is what we're doing right now, sending small, dumb, non-replicating probes like Voyager and Pioneer, which carry simple information about us. There are messages in a bottle. The von Neumann probe is the dream of sending a bottle that can build a factory to make more bottles and eventually reconstruct the people who wrote the message. The first is hard but real. The second is a chain of miracles so long that it dissolves into mythology. Therefore, this particular technological escape hatch is closed. It does not rescue the dream of human travel to Proxima Centauri. It buries it under a mountain of even more speculative and daunting requirements, only to offer a copy of a victory, not the victory itself. The stars remain out of reach for flesh and blood. They may be the domain of our intelligent machines, our data, our persistent patterns. But for the breathing, feeling, aging human being who looks up at the night sky and dreams of going, the von Neumann probe is a cold consolation. It promises that something with your name will someday be there. But you, the you reading this, will never know it. That is not exploration. It is legacy. And while leaving a legacy among the stars is a profound ambition, it is fundamentally different from the dream of the journey. One is about sending our artifacts, the other is about going ourselves. The von Neumann probe solves the first and ignores the second, proving once again that the gulf between the stars is, for beings like us, a gulf of experience that cannot be bridged by proxy. The idea of sending a copy or a machine proxy is a surrender to the physics of distance, but it also introduces a more subtle, chilling kind of distance. Even if a human crew was somehow on that ship, or even if a future version of us could be reconstructed at the destination, there is another form of isolation that is absolute and psychologically devastating. It is the isolation imposed by the speed of light itself on communication. This isn't just about being lonely. It's about being severed from the flow of history, culture and meaning. The very concept of a shared human experience dissolves over interstellar distances. Think about the launch day of a generation ship. It is a global event covered by media, with cheering crowds, speeches by world leaders, and a profound sense of shared destiny. The crew is connected to that moment, to that Earth. They carry its culture, its news, its music, its conflicts. For the first few years, communication, while delayed, still feels like a conversation. A message takes 4 years to get to Proxima Centauri. A reply takes 4 years to come back. An 8-year round trip. That's a long time, but it's within a human lifetime. You could send a message to your young child on Earth and get a reply from them as a teenager. It's painful, but it's a thread. Now, fast forward a century into the voyage. The ship is perhaps halfway, coasting at its maximum speed. The distance is now 2 light years, then 3. The round-trip communication delay stretches to 8 years, then 12. The Earth that receives a message is not the Earth that sent the last one. Political landscapes have changed. Pop culture is unrecognisable. The people the crew knew are old or gone. The messages become historical documents, not conversations. The crew are reading yesterday's news about a world that is, from their moving perspective, receding into the past at a rate of 1 year per year plus their ship's time dilation. By the time the ship arrives at Proxima Centauri, the delay is over 8 years for a simple ping. But the real rupture happens over the longer timescales of a multi-generational voyage. For a journey lasting, say, 600 years, the communication link becomes not just slow, but meaningless. A question sent by the 10th generation would take centuries to reach an Earth that has undergone who knows what transformations: climate catastrophes, technological singularities, social collapses, or perhaps the emergence of a unified planetary culture. The reply, if one is even sent by a civilization that may have completely different priorities or even a different form of consciousness, would take centuries to return. By the time it arrives, the generation that asked the question has been dust for hundreds of years. The people who receive the reply won't understand the context. The question will be an archaeological curiosity. The thread is not just stretched, it is broken. The ship becomes an orphan. This has a catastrophic effect on morale and purpose. The original mission's rationale, scientific discovery, expansion for humanity, backup for the species, depends on a connection to that humanity. If you're utterly disconnected, are you still expanding for humanity, or are you just a lost tribe drifting to nowhere? The crew's culture will inevitably diverge. They will develop their own slang, their own social norms, their own myths and religions centered on the ship and the journey. Earth will transform from a home into an abstraction, then a legend, then perhaps a forgotten point of origin. The motivating force of the mission evaporates. You're not exploring for mankind. You're just surviving in a can because your ancestors put you there. This isolation also destroys any practical mission control. There is no troubleshooting from Earth, no updates on new scientific discoveries that could aid them, no warnings about what they might find at Proxima Centauri if, centuries after they left, newer telescopes decoded the atmosphere of Proxima b and found it to be a toxic hellscape. They are flying blind into a future they cannot know, with a past that no longer knows them. For a society back on Earth, the mission becomes a money sink with no return. They invest unimaginable resources in launching the ship, and then, for what? They will never see the fruits. The data return, even if the ship sends back continuous reports, will be outdated by centuries when it arrives. The science of interstellar space could be done better by cheaper, faster robotic probes launched later with better technology. The civilization loses interest. Funding for the communication array might be cut. The giant radio telescopes that were built to listen for the ship's faint signal are dismantled for more pressing projects. One day, the ship sends a routine status report and hears nothing back. Ever again, they're alone in the silence. Now consider the psychological impact on a crew member born into this. You're taught that you're on a grand mission from Earth, but Earth is a story. You've never felt its wind, seen its open skies, or met anyone from there. Your entire world is metal and recycled air. The mission is a set of rituals and maintenance routines passed down. You look at the image of the blue planet in the historical archive with the same emotional connection a person today might feel looking at a painting of ancient Babylon. It's interesting, but it's not home. Home is the hum of the engines, the hydroponic gardens, the same faces. The star you are heading toward is just a slightly brighter light. Why are you going there? Because the story says so. This is not a stable foundation for a society over centuries. It invites a crisis of meaning, a rebellion against the ancestors, a decision to turn the ship around or change its goal, all of which are impossible because of the laws of physics in the ship's design. You're on a railroad track in the sky, and you cannot get off. The latency of communication creates a one-way flow of time. The ship is moving into the future, but its only link is to an ever more distant past of Earth. This temporal alienation is unique to interstellar travel. On Earth, or even within the solar system, we share a rough now. We watch events unfold in near real time. On an interstellar voyage, now becomes a local prison. Your now on the ship and the now on Earth are separated by years of empty space. You are living, in a very real sense, in different times. This fractures the concept of a shared human present. It means that even if humanity survives eternally on Earth, and even if a starship colony survives eternally at Proxima, they will never again be contemporaries. They will be separate historical entities, separated by a gulf of years as solid as any gulf of space. Any exchange will be an archaeological dig into each other's past. This has a profound implication for the dream of an interstellar empire or federation. Such polities are built on communication, trade and shared law, all of which require timeliness. If the fastest a message can travel is 4 years, and a reply another 4, then governance is impossible. A colony cannot be ruled from Earth. It cannot be part of a cohesive economy. It is on its own, forever. Each star system becomes an isolated island, with its own clock. The galactic community of science fiction is a fiction precisely because of this communication latency. Communities cannot form without conversation, and conversation is impossible with delays of generations. So, the isolation is not merely a feeling of loneliness, it is a concrete, physical reality that severs the social, cultural, and political bonds that make a civilization. It reduces any mission to a one-shot fire-and-forget act of faith. The ship is not an extension of humanity, it is a sacrifice. A living piece of humanity cut loose and set adrift. This finality is perhaps the most human of all the reasons we will never reach Proxima Centauri. Our drive to explore is tied to our drive to share, to report back, to connect the new with the old. We want to go and then tell the tale. We want to plant a flag and have people back home see the picture. The interstellar journey destroys that fundamental feedback loop. You go, but you cannot tell the tale to the people who matter, those who sent you. And by the time any tale reaches someone, the tellers are long dead and the listeners are strangers. The journey consumes its own meaning. Therefore, the problem of consciousness isolation is the ultimate psychological veto. It says that even if we conquer every material barrier, energy, propulsion, radiation, food, society, we would be sending humans on a journey that fundamentally invalidates the human need for connection and continuity. We would be creating a new branch of humanity that is, by necessity, amputated from its roots, destined to wither in a psychological vacuum. The stars are not just too far for our ships, they are too far for our minds. Our consciousness is a product of interaction, of a constant rich dialogue with our environment and our peers. Place it in a sealed tin can with a dialogue partner that is decades or centuries out of sync, and that consciousness will change, warp, or simply despair. The dream of humans travelling to the stars is, in the end, a dream of taking our humanity with us. But the very act of such a voyage, under the laws of physics as we know them, guarantees that the humanity which arrives would be something else entirely, something that has lost the thread of its own story. And that may be the greatest tragedy of all, to succeed in the journey only to fail in being who we set out to be. The silence of the interstellar medium is not just an absence of sound, it is an absence of echo. We shout, and by the time the echo returns, we've forgotten what we said or why we shouted at all. This transforms the grand mission from an epic to an elegy. It is a story that forgets its own beginning long before it reaches its end. So when we tally up the reasons we must include this existential isolation. It is the final argument that even if we could build the Ark, we could not bear the silence. Our social nature, our need for a shared now, is as binding a constraint as the rocket equation. The universe, by limiting the speed of light, has limited the speed of conversation, and in doing so, has dictated that civilizations are likely solitary, island universes of thought. Proxima Centauri will forever be a silent neighbour, not because we cannot point a ship at it, but because we could never have a conversation with anyone we sent there. The connection that makes the journey meaningful is the first casualty of the distance, and without meaning the journey is just motion. And purposeless motion is not exploration, it is drift. We are not built to drift for millennia. We're built to journey with a purpose we can see and share. The interstellar void steals that possibility, leaving only a hollow, endless flight. The profound isolation we just discussed isn't just a psychological tragedy, it's an economic deal-breaker. It strips away the last shred of practical justification. Let's move from the philosophical to the brutally pragmatic, the ledger, the balance sheet, the return on investment. The mission to Proxima Centauri, especially a crude one, would be the most expensive project in the history of our species by a margin so vast it's laughable. And for what? There is no return. There is no benefit to the civilization that foots the bill. This isn't just a bad investment, it's the definition of economic insanity. Think about the scale of investment required. We're not talking about the Apollo program, which at its peak consumed around 4% of the US federal budget. We are talking about consuming a significant fraction of the entire planet's economic output for centuries. The energy costs alone, as we've seen, are planetary in scale. The materials needed to build a generation ship or an interstellar probe would require mining asteroids and possibly other planets. The research and development for the thousands of breakthrough technologies would employ millions of scientists and engineers for generations before a single bolt is turned for the actual ship. This would be a civilization's singular, all-consuming focus. Now, ask the simple question, why would any society do this? What is the incentive? The classic answers, scientific knowledge, species survival, the human spirit of exploration, crumble under economic scrutiny. First, scientific knowledge. We learn about other star systems and exoplanets through astronomy. Every year our telescopes get better. The James Webb Space Telescope is already revealing the atmospheres of distant worlds. Proposed future telescopes, like a large interferometer in solar orbit, could map the surface of exoplanets in incredible detail, all for a tiny, tiny fraction of the cost of an interstellar mission. Sending a probe to Proxima Centauri would yield spectacular, unique data, yes. But that data would take decades or centuries to return, and by the time it does, telescopes in our own solar system might have already provided similar or better information through indirect methods. The marginal scientific gain per dollar spent is astronomically low. It is perhaps the most inefficient way to do science ever conceived. Second, species survival. The idea of a backup humanity is a powerful emotional driver, but economically it's nonsense. If your goal is to ensure the survival of the species against a planetary catastrophe, you have infinitely cheaper and more effective options. You could build self-sustaining bunkers deep underground or under the sea. You could build vast rotating space habitats in the asteroid belt, where resources are plentiful and travel times are days or weeks, not millennia. You could even attempt to terraform Mars. All of these projects are monstrously expensive and difficult, but they are child's play compared to interstellar travel. They offer a tangible, achievable backup within a human lifetime, with the possibility of return on investment through the development of new technologies and living space. Sending a fraction of humanity on a one-way multi-generational suicide mission to a potentially dead rock 4 light-years away is not a rational survival strategy. It's a grotesquely inefficient lottery ticket. Third, the spirit of exploration. This is the weakest argument of all at the economic table. Exploration on Earth had clear, if sometimes brutal, economic incentives. New trade routes, new resources like gold and spices, new land to settle. The age of exploration was driven by profit and geopolitical competition. Interstellar exploration offers none of that. There are no trade routes because the travel time makes trade impossible. Any resources at Proxima Centauri are hopelessly out of reach. It would be cheaper to manufacture diamonds from carbon in our own solar system than to fetch a single gram of material from another star. There is no land to settle that we can use within any meaningful time frame. The Spirit does not pay the bills for a 10,000-year construction project. No government, no matter how inspired, could sell this to its taxpayers. Imagine a president or prime minister standing up and saying, "We need to raise your taxes to a crushing level for the next 500 years to build a ship." None of you, your children, or your children's children for 100 generations will see any benefit. But your descendants in the year 4000 might get a postcard from a planet that might be habitable. Maybe. That government would fall in a day, in a world of finite resources and immediate pressing problems: climate change, poverty, disease, political instability, environmental degradation. The idea of diverting the wealth of nations to a symbolic gesture into the void is the height of irrationality. It would be viewed as a criminal misallocation of capital and human effort. Furthermore, the economic structure required is impossible. It assumes a level of long-term political and economic stability that human civilization has never demonstrated. Our economic systems operate on timescales of years, maybe decades. Corporate planning looks 5 years ahead. Government budgets are annual. The longest megaprojects in human history, like cathedrals, took centuries but were localized, low-tech and funded by a continuous cultural tradition. An interstellar mission requires a global, centralized, technocratic command economy, sustained without faltering for longer than the Roman Empire lasted. It requires every successive generation to agree to continue paying for a dream they did not conceive, with money they could use to solve their own problems. History shows that such continuity is a fantasy. Priorities shift, empires fall, revolutions happen. The project would be cancelled within a century, leaving a half-built monument in orbit as a testament to overreach. There's also the problem of who benefits. In a capitalist model, there is no profit, so private enterprise will not fund it. In a socialist or communal model, the people would reject it as a luxury they cannot afford. It falls into a void between all possible economic systems. It is a project that can only be imagined in a resource post-scarcity society, but if a society had truly limitless resources, it would likely have solved its problems at home and have little motivation to leave. The economic paradox is this: any society capable of funding an interstellar mission is a society that has solved its basic problems of energy, material want, and likely social strife. But a society that has solved those problems has little existential impetus to undertake such a desperate, resource-hogging gamble. A society that is still struggling with those problems cannot afford it. The mission exists in an economic neverland. Finally, let's consider the opportunity cost. The minds, the materials, the energy poured into this one cosmic vanity project represent an unimaginable diversion of human potential. Those brilliant engineers could be working on fusion power, solving clean energy on Earth. Those resources could be used to build sustainable cities, purify oceans, advance medicine, and uplift billions from poverty. The very act of attempting the mission would likely require a level of industrial activity that could exacerbate the very planetary crises it supposedly seeks to escape. You might destroy Earth's ecosystem in the process of building a lifeboat from it. So, when we strip away the romance, the economic argument is the most grounded and definitive of all. It doesn't rely on speculative physics or the future of human psychology. It relies on the immutable logic of scarcity and incentive that has governed human endeavour since its beginning. We are a species that responds to tangible rewards with imperceptible timeframes. Interstellar travel offers none. It is the ultimate example of a project with catastrophic costs and zero benefits for the entity that undertakes it. Therefore, no rational, resource-constrained civilization will ever choose to build a starship. It will always be a lower priority than every other conceivable use of those resources. The dream will always be deferred by the pressing needs of the present, and since the present, with its cycles of crisis and growth, is eternal for a living civilization, the dream is perpetually postponed until it is forgotten. The economic barrier is not a technical hurdle to be overcome with better engineering. It is a reflection of a fundamental truth about organised societies. They cannot act against their own immediate self-interest on such a scale. The treasury of a world cannot be spent on a poem written in empty space. Proxima Centauri will remain unreached not because we can't conceive of a way, but because we can never conceive of a reason that justifies the price tag to the people who would have to pay it. The project dies in the committee stage, in the budget office, in the angry protests of a populace that wants hospitals and schools, not a monument to ambition that their great-great-grandchildren won't even see launched. In the end, the stars are not just too far, too dangerous, and too hostile. They're too expensive. And in a universe of limited resources, that is the most unanswerable argument of all. The balance sheet of the cosmos is unforgiving, and the column for profit is permanently, irredeemably empty. The economic argument makes the project seem foolish from the start, but let's say you somehow overcome that. You convince a global civilization to pour its treasure into a centuries-long construction project. The ship is built. It's a marvel, incorporating the absolute pinnacle of human technology from its era. The most efficient fusion drives, the most sophisticated radiation shields, the most advanced closed-loop life support systems. The crew, the best and brightest, board with a mix of terror and triumph. The engines fire, the ship begins its acceleration, heading for Proxima Centauri on a voyage that will take, let's say, 600 years. At that moment, as the ship vanishes into the dark, it becomes a museum piece. It is already obsolete. This is the crushing paradox of technological obsolescence on an interstellar timescale, and it alone dismantles the logic of any long-duration mission. Consider the pace of change here on Earth. Look at the difference between the computer technology of 1970 and today. That's 50 years. The smartphone in your pocket is millions of times more powerful than the guidance computer that took Apollo to the moon. Now, imagine that rate of change, or even a fraction of it, sustained for a century, for 2 centuries, for 6. The society that remains on Earth is not frozen in time. It continues to think, to invent, to discover. It is unshackled from the brutal constraints of a starship design. A starship is a locked system. Its mass, its power supply, its physical structure are all finalized at launch. You cannot rip open the hull in flight to install a new type of reactor discovered 50 years into the journey. You're stuck with what you left with. Meanwhile, back home, physicists might crack the mystery of gravity control or discover a new fundamental force that enables warp drives. Engineers might create a viable antimatter production facility, making fuel that is 1,000 times more energy dense than your ship's fusion pellets. Or more likely, they will make incremental but massive improvements in every relevant field. Material science yielding lighter and stronger hull composites, nanotechnology creating self-repairing systems, artificial intelligence advancing to a level that makes your ship's computers look like abacuses. 150 years after your ship departs, Earth launches a new probe. It is tiny because its propulsion is 1,000 times more efficient. It is accelerated by a massive laser array built on Mercury, a project that was just a sketch in a notebook when your generation ship left. This probe, small and swift, zips past your lumbering arc halfway to Proxima Centauri. It arrives at the destination, conducts its surveys, and starts beaming data back to Earth decades before your ship even enters the target star system. Your crew, still alive in their great-grandchildren's time, might receive a radio message from Earth containing the complete geological survey of Proxima b, along with greetings from the AI that conducted it. Their grand mission of discovery has been preempted. They are pilgrims arriving at a shrine that has already been thoroughly documented and live-streamed. Their purpose is gone. For a robotic mission, this is merely embarrassing. For a generation ship carrying thousands of souls committed to a multi-century journey, it is existentially devastating. The entire cultural and motivational foundation of their society, the sacred mission to be the first, to bring back knowledge, is obliterated by a postcard from home that says "Been there, mapped that." This scenario isn't a minor risk. It is a statistical certainty over such timescales. Technological progress does not stop. The only way to avoid being overtaken is if your civilization enters a period of permanent stagnation at the exact moment of your launch, a stagnation that then lasts for the entire duration of the voyage. But if your civilization is so stagnant, how did it muster the dynamism to build in Starship in the first place? The two ideas are contradictory. A vibrant, innovative culture builds the ship, then must immediately cease all innovation for it to retain its value. This is impossible. The very act of building such a ship guarantees that it will be surpassed. There is a counter-argument. We will design the ship to be upgradable. We will include factories and labs to advance technology on board. This is a fantasy of compounding complexity. It attempts to turn the ship into a moving copy of Earth's entire technological base, which circles back to the von Neumann probe problem but with infinitely more baggage. The energy and mass required for such a self-improving industrial ecosystem would be even more prohibitive. And even if you could, you're still a small, isolated population with limited resources. Earth, with billions of minds, a whole planet's resources, and the freedom to conduct experiments that would be far too risky on a ship carrying all your descendants, will outpace you, always. The innovation bottleneck is not just about size, it's about the freedom to fail. Earth can test a radical new engine design, and if it explodes, it's a setback. On the Generation ship, testing a radical new engine design could crack the hull and kill everyone. The ship is inherently conservative, prioritizing survival over revolutionary leaps. Earth has no such constraint. This obsolescence extends beyond propulsion and sensors to the most fundamental aspect, biology. Suppose your ship leaves with humans in cryogenic sleep, a classic sci-fi trope. The science of suspended animation is in its infancy. Your pods are the best that 22nd century medicine can produce. 200 years later, scientists on Earth perfect mind uploading or discover how to rejuvenate cells, effectively conquering aging. The humans who stayed behind become post-biological, their consciousnesses living in robust, durable substrates. They can now travel as information at the speed of light or in tiny, durable probes. Your frozen pioneers, with their fragile, aging bodies, are now relics of a primitive era. They arrive as quaint historical curiosities. The destination may even have been settled centuries prior by their post-human descendants, who left later but travelled in a more advanced form. This is the ultimate irony. You leave to preserve humanity, and in your absence humanity evolves beyond you. You become the Neanderthals of the stars, a dead-end branch that left in search of a future that passed you by. The timescales enforce this outcome. A voyage of centuries is a blank check for technological revolution back home. The only missions that could potentially avoid this are those travelling at a significant fraction of light speed, where the subjective time for the crew is short. But as we've established, achieving those speeds is itself a technological hurdle so vast that solving it would itself represent a singularity-level leap, likely rendering the mission profile obsolete in the process. The obsolescence problem therefore creates a vicious logical circle. If the journey is slow, you will be overtaken by better technology developed after you left. If the journey is fast, achieving the necessary speed requires technology so advanced that by the time you have it, the very concept of a crewed starship might be absurd. Why send fragile bodies when you can send data or immortal post-humans? The project never exists in the sweet spot. It is always either too early, using primitive tech that dooms it to be a crawl, or it becomes possible in an era where its original rationale has evaporated. This is why we see no starships in the galaxy, if you buy into the Fermi paradox for a moment. It's not that intelligent life doesn't arise, it's that the window for launching a generation ship or a slow sleeper ship is incredibly narrow. It occurs after a species gains spaceflight, but before its technology advances to the point of making such ships pointless. That window might be only a few centuries, maybe less. In cosmic terms, that's a blink. A civilization might look at the stars, draw up plans for a generation ship, and by the time they're halfway through building it, their science has moved on, and they scrap the project. The starship is perpetually the thing we were asterisk about asterisk to build, until we think of something better. For us, today, the idea's a dead end. Any ship we could conceive with our 21st century knowledge would be a joke to our descendants, just a few generations hence. They would look at our designs with the same pity we look at Jules Verne's moon cannon. The path to the stars, if there is one, does not lie in building a slower-than-light arc with today's understanding. It lies in waiting for a breakthrough that changes the rules entirely. But if and when that breakthrough comes, the very notion of what constitutes a mission and a crew will have transformed beyond recognition. The dream of a shipload of humans like us, travelling to another star, is a dream trapped in a specific, fleeting moment of technological adolescence. It is the dream of a species that has just learned to sail but hasn't yet invented the steam engine, dreaming of building a giant wooden canoe to cross the Pacific. The canoe will never be built because the shipyard will invent steel and turbines first, and the canoe will no longer make sense. So we must add technological obsolescence to our growing list of showstoppers. It is the argument from progress itself. It says that the universe isn't just big and empty, it's also moving fast in the realm of ideas. A starship launched today is a message to the future, but the message is written in vanishing ink. By the time it arrives, the language will have changed, and the senders will have forgotten they wrote it. The journey, therefore, is not just through space, but through time, and travelling into the future while locked in a coffin of the past is a special kind of hell. It is the final logical rebuke to the generation ship concept. You cannot embark on a journey that long without your civilization moving on without you, leaving you and your magnificent ship as a footnote, a beautiful, tragic anachronism sailing into the night. The momentum of innovation on the home world will always outrun the momentum of a vessel in space. Always. The obsolescence of the ship and its mission is a bitter enough pill, but it rests on a hopeful assumption that the destination is worth the obsolescence. That after millennia of journey, the prize at the end is a new world, a living planet, a potential home. This assumption is the engine of the entire fantasy, but it is almost certainly false. Proxima Centauri b, the tantalizing exoplanet in the habitable zone, is not a welcoming Earth twin. It is most likely a dead world, a radiation-scorched wasteland, or a frozen global ocean trapped under a toxic atmosphere. Betting everything on its habitability is not a gamble, it is a certain loss. The reason lies with the star itself. Proxima Centauri is not a gentle, stable G-type star like our Sun. It is a red dwarf, a class of star that makes up about 75% of the stars in our galaxy. They are small, cool, and notoriously temperamental. The most critical trait for our purposes is their propensity for stellar flares. These are not like the occasional solar flares our Sun produces. Red dwarfs, especially young active ones like Proxima, can unleash superflares with terrifying frequency. These eruptions blast out X-rays and ultraviolet radiation at levels hundreds to thousands of times more powerful than anything the Sun emits. A planet like Proxima b, which orbits 20 times closer to its star than Earth does to the Sun, takes the full force of this barrage. Imagine being on a world where several times a week the sky erupts with an invisible pulse of energy powerful enough to strip away an atmosphere, fry electronics, and deliver a lethal radiation dose to any exposed surface life in a matter of minutes. This isn't a periodic danger, it is the constant weather. The scientific consensus is that such flaring would have, over billions of years, eroded any substantial atmosphere Proxima b might have initially had. The high-energy radiation splits water and other atmospheric molecules, allowing the lightweight hydrogen to escape into space in a process called hydrodynamic escape. What might be left is a thin, desiccated husk of an atmosphere, or none at all. Without a thick atmospheric blanket, the planet cannot regulate temperature or hold liquid water on its surface. Even if it resides in the habitable zone, the distance where liquid water is theoretically possible, it could be a barren rock. But let's be generous again. Let's assume Proxima b, through some miraculous geological or magnetic shielding, has held onto a thick atmosphere. The problems only multiply. Due to its extremely close orbit, Proxima b is almost certainly tidally locked. This means one side permanently faces the star in eternal, scorching daylight, and the other side is in perpetual frigid night. The terminator line between them would be the only region with potentially moderate temperatures, but it would be a place of howling, planet-spanning winds as the atmosphere tries to equalize the extreme thermal difference. The climate would be unlike anything on Earth, a global hurricane of superheated and supercooled air. There would be no day-night cycle as we know it, just a permanent gradient from furnace to freezer. This alone would make the surface profoundly hostile to Earth-like life and human settlement. Furthermore, the nature of the light is different. Red dwarfs emit most of their energy in the infrared spectrum. Photosynthesis as we know it, which is tuned to the sun's visible light output, might not work efficiently. Any plant life would have to be radically different. For human colonists, the dim reddish light would be psychologically draining and agriculturally challenging without extensive artificial supplementation. Then there is the radiation again. Even without catastrophic flares, the ambient X-ray and ultraviolet flux from a quiet red dwarf is much higher relative to the star's total output than our sun's. A surface environment would be constantly bathed in this mutagenic radiation. Any life and any human settlers would require constant shielding. You wouldn't be living on a planet, you'd be living in a bunker on a planet, which defeats the entire purpose of going there. Now consider the journey's end. A multi-generational ship having survived centuries of cosmic radiation, micrometeoroid impacts and social strife finally arrives at the Proxima system. They deploy probes and find an airless rock, or a world with a surface pressure 100 times that of Earth, composed of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid, or a global ice sheet over a deep, dark ocean. Their promised land is a grave. They cannot land, they cannot replenish their resources. They are trapped in their ship, now a permanent space station orbiting a deadly star, with no possibility of return to an Earth that has forgotten them. This is the ultimate, cruel punchline. The entire epic struggle was for nothing. The destination was a mirage. This scenario is not a pessimistic outlier. It is the most likely outcome based on our current understanding of red dwarf astrophysics and planetary science. We are drawn to Proxima b because it is close and in the zone, but that zone around a red dwarf is a treacherous place. The very factors that make the star long-lived, its slow fuel burn, also make it a violent and capricious parent to planets. When you combine this with the earlier point about technological obsolescence, the folly is compounded. A ship launched with 22nd century technology might arrive, to find that 25th century telescopes from Earth have already conclusively proven Proxima b is uninhabitable, but the message travelling at the speed of light hasn't caught up to them yet. They learn the horrifying truth only upon arrival. The proponents of interstellar travel will argue that we should send robotic probes first to scout. Absolutely. And that is precisely what we're doing with projects like Breakthrough Starshot, which aims to send tiny laser-propelled sails to the system. But this logical step itself dismantles the crude mission concept. If we send scouts and they report back in 50 years that the planet is a hellscape, the impetus for sending a generation ship vanishes. The only reason to send humans is if the robots find a paradise. But given the stellar physics, a paradise around a red dwarf is incredibly unlikely, so the robotic scout phase acts as a filter, blocking the crewed mission before it ever gets funded. We are left with a circular logic. We cannot justify sending humans until we know the destination is habitable, but once we know enough to confirm habitability, which requires incredibly advanced nearby reconnaissance, we likely have the technology to get the data without sending humans, or we discover it's not habitable. The crewed mission never finds its justification. It is always premature or unnecessary. This focus on Proxima b also ignores a deeper point. Even if, against all odds, it were a lush, Earth-like world, the challenges of settling it are themselves interstellar in scale. You would need to land all the infrastructure for a self-sustaining colony in a completely alien ecosystem. The biology would be incompatible. The microbes, the pollen, the potential native life. All of it could be deadly or could be wiped out by Earth imports. You're not colonizing an empty continent. You're attempting to insert a human biosphere into a functioning alien one, with unpredictable and likely catastrophic results. The notion that we would arrive and simply start farming is naive in the extreme. It would be a centuries-long project of terraforming or of living in sealed domes, again making the perilous journey seem pointless when you could build better domes in the comfort of your own solar system. So the hostile destination problem is a master key that locks several doors. It makes the economic investment even more insane, as the payoff is probably non-existent. It makes the technological obsolescence even more tragic, as you arrive obsolete at a useless rock. It amplifies the psychological devastation for a generation ship crew, whose ancestral struggle culminates in a vista of desolation. And it highlights that our fascination with Proxima Centauri is born of proximity, not promise. It is the closest star, but it is almost certainly the worst candidate for a new Earth within dozens of light years. Better, more stable sun-like stars exist farther away, but their distance only magnifies every other problem we've discussed. Therefore, the dream isn't just challenged by the journey, it is betrayed by the destination. The universe isn't merely putting barriers on the road, it's telling us the road leads to a cliff. The final, crushing realization for any would-be interstellar travellers is that after conquering the impossible void, they would find not a new beginning, but a dead end. This transforms the mission from a noble endeavour into a cosmic satire. The hero's journey ends not with a new world, but with the punchline of a universe that doesn't care for fairy tales. Proxima b stands as a symbol not of hope, but of the profound mismatch between our ambitions and galactic reality. We dream of green valleys and blue skies, but the closest answer to our dream is most likely a silent, irradiated rock under a sullen, flickering red sun. To spend the wealth of worlds and the lives of generations to reach such a place is the height of folly. It is the final environmental argument that seals the case. We will never reach Proxima Centauri because, even if we could, there is nothing there for us. The destination itself is a no written in geology and stellar physics, and so the dream dies not with a bang but with a quiet dust-dry whisper in the eternal night. It turns out that the greatest obstacle isn't the distance or the time or the energy, it's the utter, profound lack of a reason to go. When the destination offers no refuge, no reward, and no future, the journey isn't just hard, it's meaningless. And humans, for all our irrationality, eventually stop doing things that are provably catastrophically meaningless. The hostile environment of Proxima b is that proof. It is the data point that kills the fantasy. We are left looking at a star that is, for all practical human purposes, just a light in the sky, not a destination, not a goal, just a reminder of the beautiful, terrible emptiness between islands of life in this cosmos. And perhaps that's okay. Perhaps our role is to tend our own island, our solar system, with greater care, knowing it is likely all we will ever have. The quest for Proxima Centauri, then, ends not in failure, but in a mature understanding of our place. The star is not a taunt, it is a teacher, and the lesson is that home is precious and rare, and we would be wise to cherish the one we have. So the destination is a bust, and the technology will be outdated, and the economics are insane. Yet, some might still argue that if the will is there, humanity could overcome these hurdles, that if we wanted it badly enough, we would find a way. This leads us to the deepest, most human reason of all. We lack the collective will and, more importantly, we lack the civilizational continuity to see such a project through. The history of humanity is not a story of steady, linear progress toward a grand goal. It is a story of cycles, of rise and fall, of golden ages and dark ages, of unification and fragmentation. We cannot maintain a consistent purpose for the length of time required to build and launch an interstellar arc, because our societies themselves are not built to last that long in a stable, goal-oriented state. Think about the longest continuous projects in human history. The construction of the Great Wall of China occurred over many centuries, but it was not a single, unified project with one blueprint and one administration. It was a series of separate projects by different dynasties, with long periods of neglect in between. The Cologne Cathedral took over 600 years to complete, but construction halted for centuries at a time. These projects survived because they were rooted in a persistent cultural idea, defense from nomads or faith in God that transcended individual regimes. But they also demonstrate the fits and starts, the lost knowledge, the changed designs that occur over such spans. An interstellar mission cannot afford a 300-year pause because a dark age descends or because a war consumes all resources. It requires not just continuity, but focused, escalating investment for longer than most empires have lasted. Now consider the political and social reality of a project that would need to command the resources of an entire planet for 1,000 years. It requires a global government, or at least an unshakable global alliance that remains committed to this single goal. But look at human history on a scale of mere decades. Alliances shift, nations rise and fall, political ideologies come and go. The world that launches the ship would be unrecognisable to the world that sees it halfway through its construction. A new political movement could arise, one that sees the starship as a symbol of elite extravagance and cancels it, selling the materials for housing or melting down the hull for weapons. A global war could shatter the cooperation needed. An economic depression could permanently dry up funding. A cultural revolution could reject the very scientific and exploratory ethos that birthed the project. The ship is a sitting duck for the tides of history. Furthermore, the project requires that the technological and industrial base not only be maintained, but expanded for centuries. This assumes perpetual peace and prosperity, but our history is punctuated by collapse. The Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, the fragmentation of empires. These events set back technology, destroyed infrastructure, and erased knowledge. Our current global technological civilization is only about a century old. It is fragile. It depends on complex supply chains, stable climates, and political order. Assuming it will persist unchanged for 1,000 years is the most optimistic assumption of all, and flies in the face of everything we know about the dynamics of complex societies. They are prone to crisis. Even if we avoid a catastrophic collapse, priorities change. The people who champion the project initially are driven by a specific vision, but their grandchildren might be more concerned with virtual realities, or genetic engineering, or solving climate change at home. The exploration ethos is not a permanent fixture of the human psyche. It is a cultural mood that comes and goes. The generation that builds the ship might be a rare, optimistic, outward-looking anomaly in a long history of inward-focused struggle. The next generation might look at the half-built behemoth in orbit and ask, why are we wasting our lives finishing our great-grandparents' dream when we have our own problems? And they would be right. This gets to the heart of the continuity problem. The disconnect between the sacrifices and the beneficiaries. The people who pay the costs and taxes in labour and diverted resources are not the people who will benefit. The benefit, if it exists, is for people so far in the future they are mythical. This is a terrible motivator. Human altruism has limits. We care about our children and grandchildren. We can be inspired to act for the vague concept of future generations. But to ask people to live in austerity for a goal that will only matter to people 100 generations removed is to ask for a level of abstract long-term thinking that is evolutionarily unnatural. Our brains are wired for immediate and near-term threats and rewards. A project that offers no reward for 50 generations triggers no deep instinct. It is an intellectual concept, and intellectual concepts are weak glue against the hard realities of hunger, conflict, and the desire for a better life now. Some imagine a future where humanity is unified and solved all its problems, entering a stable utopian state where such a project is finally possible. But this is a circular argument. It says we will be able to build a starship once we become a different civilization. And if we are a different civilization, one that is stable, unified, and post-scarcity, would it even want to? The driving forces for a desperate multi-generational gamble, overpopulation, resource depletion, existential risk, might be absent. A utopia might have no need to leave, and a dystopia might have no means. The window for a starship might be a brief period of technological adolescence coupled with deep existential anxiety, a period we may be in now, but even now, we cannot muster the will. We cannot agree on a common plan to address climate change, a crisis that is on our doorstep. The idea that we could agree on a 1,000-year plan to build a lifeboat to the stars is almost comical. Our political systems are built on short election cycles, catering to immediate grievances. Our economic systems demand quarterly profits. Our media cycle is 24 hours. Our entire societal attention span is shrinking, not expanding to encompass millennia. The very tools we've built to connect us have, in some ways, made us more fractured and short-term in our thinking. A civilization capable of an interstellar project would need a mythos, a unifying story so powerful it becomes the central pillar of culture for ages. In the past, religion provided such stories, enabling the construction of cathedrals and pyramids. But in our secular, scientifically oriented world, what story is powerful enough? The story of spreading life or backing up humanity might inspire a few, but it lacks the emotional, visceral punch of divine commandment or the promise of salvation. It is a cerebral narrative, and cerebral narratives do not build cathedrals across centuries. They get debated in podcasts and then forgotten when the next news cycle hits. In the end, the absence of collective will and civilizational continuity is the umbrella reason that encompasses all others. It says that even if the physics were lenient and the engineering possible, we would still fail because we are who we are. We are a species of short-term thinkers living in societies that are complex adaptive systems, prone to turbulence and phase shifts. We do not do millennia-long projects. We do not sustain that kind of focus. Our greatness lies in bursts of creativity and effort, in sprints, not marathons that last for geological epochs. The starship requires a marathon where every single runner for 10,000 generations must take the baton and run at the same speed, in the same direction without stumbling. One dropped baton, one generation that loses interest or is conquered or turns inward, and the race is over. The statistical probability of that unbroken chain is 0. History is the study of broken chains. Therefore, the dream of reaching Proxima Centauri dies on the launchpad of human nature and history. It is not a technical problem. It is a sociological and historical impossibility. Our civilizations are mortal. They are born, they grow, they peak, they decline. An interstellar mission requires an immortal civilization, one that has conquered not just physics, but its own internal dynamics. It requires the end of history, and that is a fantasy. So, when we look at the stars, we are not looking at a future we are destined to reach. We are looking at a mirror. The void between the stars reflects back our own limitations, not just as physical beings, but as social and historical beings. We are bound to our biological clocks and to the cyclical clocks of our cultures. The journey to another star requires a linear, upward trajectory of effort and purpose that is alien to the human story. Our story is a spiral, not a line. And spirals do not converge on distant suns, they turn in on themselves, creating patterns of repetition and return. This is not a failure, it is a recognition of our condition. We are local creatures in time as well as space. Our epoch will pass, our civilization will transform, our species will evolve or go extinct. The idea that we could project our current form, our current minds, our current society, across such a gulf is a profound arrogance, a denial of the very nature of time and change that defines life and history. Proxima Centauri will remain untouched by human hands because the hands that might have reached for it will have long since turned to other tasks, or turned to dust, their great-great-grandchildren living under different suns, either here or in digital realms we cannot imagine, with dreams we would not recognize. The stars are not for this version of us. They are for the beings we might become, or more likely for no one at all. The silence of the cosmos is not just an absence of alien signals, it is the silence of civilizations that either never left their cradle or evolved into forms for which physical travel between stars is as irrelevant as a canoe voyage across the Pacific is to us. We are in that cradle, and the cradle is where we belong. The stars are the view from the nursery window, beautiful, inspiring, but ultimately marking a boundary we are not meant to cross. The lack of collective will is not a lack of courage, it is an unconscious wisdom, an understanding deep in our bones that such a journey is not our story to tell. Our story is here, on this pale blue dot, and it is magnificent and tragic and brief, and that is enough. So, after walking through that gauntlet of impossibility, the scale, the broken rockets, the light speed law, the crumbling generation ships, the impossible energy bills, the corrosive space environment, our frail biology, the doomed ecosystems, the copy machine paradox, the silent communications, the terrible economics, the certain obsolescence, the deadly destinations, and our fractured, short-lived wills, we aren't just left with a list of problems, we are left with a clear, inescapable picture of what we are. This isn't about giving up, it's about seeing the map correctly for the first time. The sum total of all these factors leads to one humbling but probable conclusion. Human beings, in our current biological form, are local explorers. We are not and will never be interstellar travellers. The dream of personally going to another star is a beautiful misunderstanding, a confusion of scale and capability. The true future of deep space exploration does not belong to flesh and blood. It belongs to our machines, our artificial intelligences, and perhaps to whatever post-biological consciousness we might eventually create. These entities do not suffer our limitations. They do not need air, water, or food. They do not age on decade-long journeys. They can be radiation hardened. They can be shut down for centuries and rebooted. They can be copied and transmitted. The cosmos is harsh, but it is far more forgiving to a probe of silicon and steel than it is to a bag of water and fragile DNA. This isn't a sad thought. It's a liberation. It frees us from a fantasy that was never ours to fulfill and redirects our energy to what we can actually achieve. Our destiny, our true and immense challenge, is right here in our own solar system. This is our garden, and it is enormous. Think about it. We have not yet set foot on Mars, we have not mined the asteroids, which hold more mineral wealth than the entire Earth. We have not built permanent habitats on the Moon or in free space. We have not tapped the resources of the gas giants. The solar system is a domain so vast that exploiting it fully would occupy humanity for millennia. It is a project that matches our scales. Travel times are years, not millennia. Communication is minutes or hours, not centuries. We can send robotic scouts and follow with human crews within a single lifetime. We can build economies based on space resources. We can establish a true multi-planet civilization without confronting the absolute barriers of interstellar space. This is our age of exploration. This is our equivalent of the great oceanic voyages, but within our local waters. The ship for this age is not a generation ark, it is a fusion-powered tugboat hauling asteroid ore to a Mars colony. The Pioneer is not a doomed ancestor on a one-way trip. It is a geologist on a 5-year tour on Titan, with a return ticket home. This is what we're built for. Our biology can handle this, with effort. Our psychology can handle this, with rotation. Our economics can justify this, with tangible returns. Our technology is on the cusp of this. We are solar system creatures, and within that sphere we have a critical role. We are the builders, the programmers, the curators. We send our silicon eyes and minds ahead of us. Our robots are our advanced scouts, our proxies. They go to the dangerous places first. They map the terrain, test the conditions, and prepare the way. The Mars rovers are not poor substitutes for humans. They are the perfect tools for the initial reconnaissance. Future robots will build infrastructure, assemble habitats, and pave the way for our eventual arrival. This division of labour is not a compromise. It is the optimal strategy. We do the thinking, the dreaming, and the directing from the relative safety of Earth or nearby stations. Our machines do the enduring and the risking in the extreme environments. Together, we expand. But that expansion has a boundary, and Proxima Centauri is that boundary. It will forever remain a point of light in the sky, a symbol of a fundamental limit. It is not a taunt. It is a cosmic signpost that says, beyond here, the rules change. Accepting that limit is not a failure of ambition, it is a mark of maturity. It is recognizing that the universe is not designed for easy travel, and that our particular form of life is adapted to a very specific niche. Being stuck in our solar system is not a prison sentence. It is a recognition of our true condition. We're a species of one world destined to flourish in our local garden. That garden is unimaginably rich and offers more than enough room and challenge for all our ambitions for the foreseeable future. The question of why we never reach Proxima Centauri is not a sad one. It is an invitation to recalibrate, to value what we have, and to understand our proper place in the universe. It tells us to look around, not just out there. The solar system is our home, and we have only just begun to explore its rooms. Imagine the future. Cities under domes on Mars shimmering with reflected sunlight. Vast agricultural rings rotating at Lagrange points. Mining stations on metallic asteroids, feeding a thriving orbital industry. Research bases on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, studying subsurface oceans for signs of alien life. This is not a small future. This is a staggering, epic future that will test every ounce of our ingenuity and cooperation. It is a future that fits us. Chasing the interstellar dream, by contrast, is like a medieval farmer spending his life building a wooden rocket to reach the moon, ignoring the fertile fields around him that could feed his family and village for generations. It is a misallocation of spirit. Our science will still reach the stars, but through photons, not flesh. Our telescopes will analyse the atmospheres of exoplanets. Our laser communications might one day send tiny sail probes to nearby systems, and we will wait decades for the trickle of data to return. That data will be ours to study and marvel at. We will know the cosmos, not by walking on it, but by understanding it. That is a profound form of exploration too. The human mind can cross light years in an instant through mathematics and imagination. Our instruments extend our senses. We are not confined, we are connected through knowledge. So, the philosophical conclusion is this. We are not the universe's great interstellar travellers. We are its local gardeners, its curious observers, its builders of tools that can go where we cannot. Our greatness lies in our ability to create and project intelligence beyond our biological limits, not in our ability to haul our vulnerable bodies across an infinite desert. This redefines the meaning of space exploration. Success is not a footprint on an exoplanet. Success is a thriving, sustainable civilization within our solar system, learning about the wider universe through a network of increasingly intelligent machines. Proxima Centauri therefore becomes a useful symbol. It keeps our ambitions in check. It reminds us that some horizons are for seeing, not for crossing. It teaches us humility before the sheer physicality of creation. And in that humility, we find a clearer purpose. We stop straining against laws we cannot break and start mastering the domain we've been given. This is not a retreat. It is a consolidation of purpose. It is the difference between a child dreaming of flying by flapping its arms and an engineer building an airplane. The child's dream is beautiful, but the engineer's reality is what actually gets us into the sky. We are the engineers. Our sky is the solar system. The airplane is our technology. The stars are for later, for other kinds of beings, perhaps our own descendants in forms we would not recognize. But for us, here and now, as humans of Earth, our journey is here. This realization should fill us with focus, not frustration. The project is immense enough. Let's build that future in our backyard first. Let's make our solar system bloom with life and intelligence. Let's ensure that this pale blue dot, and all the dots we spread to nearby, becomes a beacon of what a conscious technological species can achieve within the bounds of its nature. The stars will still be there, shining, reminding us of the vastness, but we will look at them with different eyes, not with the longing of an exile desperate to escape, but with the contentment of a settled homeowner looking at the beautiful distant mountains, happy in the knowledge that his own garden is still full of undiscovered corners. We are home, and home is bigger and more wonderful than we often admit. The journey to Proxima Centauri is a dead end because it was never our journey to begin with. Our journey is just getting started right here.